Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if shy Hinata loved Naruto at night? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. Now enjoy the video. A tall man stood with his head down, spiky gray hair flopping over his concealed left eye. His gaze fell onto a boy at his feet, whose broken body lay bleeding on the shore of an infamous waterfall. The crimson liquid flowed steadily from the boy's chest, seeping into the grass and dirt. The boy's torso still rose and fell, signaling to all that he wouldn't go without a fight, but the tall man knew his pupil wouldn't last much longer. How could he, when a great, big hole had replaced his right lung? No, the boy would die within the hour, and the tall man's last link to his past would disappear. The legacy, the son of the great fourth fire shadow, who had been the tall man's teacher, was faced with a horrible fate which he could not escape: death. Kakashi felt something prickle at the edge of his eyes. It was a sensation that he had not felt for a while, a sensation he had hoped to never feel again. Salty tears soon joined the rain streaming down Kakashi's masked face. Even his forehead protector could not conceal his weeping eyes, for a spot of wetness grew at its edge, beneath his Sharingan eye. The tall man soon fell to his knees, crying for the first time in a long time. He collapsed in upon himself, thighs in his stomach, shins in the dirt. His face was buried in his arms, and Kakashi of the Sharingan looked truly pathetic for the first time in his life. The thunder above his head hid his anguished cries, but Kakashi paid it no mind. He had lost one of the most precious people he had ever had. His last link to his old team, save his Sharingan, would soon be gone for good. Kakashi suddenly reared up, face towards the weeping clouds. He took a deep breath, then showed the world how upset he was. He screamed to the sky, releasing pent-up angers and sorrows. His scream echoed across the forest, scaring animals from their hiding places. But nobody heard it. A hyperactive blonde lay on his back, his spiky hair dripping with water, and his orange jumpsuit in tatters around his chest. Blood coated his body, both his own and another's. His sapphire blue eyes, previously hidden behind tan eyelids, were slowly beginning to open. The whisker marks on his cheeks stretched momentarily as his nose twitched. In a sudden blur of motion, he sat straight up, his eyes wide open. What? Where the hell am I? Now conscious, he looked at his surroundings to find a large, sewer-like hall with a wall of bars directly in front of him, or rather, a battered and frayed wall of bars that were half broken. A rumble suddenly shook the room he was in, and a large piece of what appeared to be concrete dropped from the ceiling to splash into the water around him. What the hell? A huge, hulking figure seemed to materialize out of the shadows behind the bars, a snarl on its vulpine muzzle. Its crimson fur glistened with the same water that soaked the blonde's hair, and even in the crumbling landscape, it seemed to possess an air of power and arrogance. The blonde named Naruto pointed his finger at the giant fox. An angry look stretched across his face. This is your fault. What are you doing? My fault? The fox growled, baring its shiny fangs. I'll admit that some of the blame belongs to me, but a fair portion of it falls on your ass, too. If you had actually tried your best against that spiky-haired lunatic, we wouldn't even be in this mess. Now we're dying, and even if I send one or both of us back in time, we wouldn't be able to change anything important enough. What are you talking about now, stupid fox? What do you mean, sending us back in time? Pipe down, brat, it doesn't matter. There's only two things that could have changed the outcome of that battle, and you can't use either of them. The demon fox suddenly gained a thoughtful look, which seemed quite weird on its animalistic face. Unless, yes, that just might work. Naruto looked confused. What are you mumbling about now? Quiet, it hissed. We don't have much time, so I'll have to give you the short explanation. Naruto sat down, ignoring the debris falling around him. Go ahead. Now, believe it or not, you have a bloodline, it began, but it scarcely got that much in before Naruto interrupted. What? He asked, teetering on his heels. A bloodline? Are you serious? Yes. Take that, Sasuke Teme. Shut up. Kyuubi roared. Now don't interrupt me a second time. Okay, so you have a bloodline. But the unfortunate thing is, you'll never activate it, so long as I'm here. Your fourth Hokage didn't realize that the seal he used would not only seal me, but your bloodline limit as well. or that me and my chakra helping you in dire situations would interfere with its activation. Which bloodline do I have? Naruto couldn't help himself, he was dying to know. The Kyuubi leered at him, as much as I hate it, the accursed Sharingan is very powerful, and is indeed dormant within you. But, as I said, with me here, you'll never awaken it. Naruto's face fell. However, the Kyuubi paused for dramatic effect. There is a way to activate it, and then send you back in time, thus allowing you to keep the activated Sharingan and activate and deactivate it at your will. How? How? Naruto asked, excited but also wary of his tenant. It's quite simple, the Kyuubi said. First, we have to shatter the seal. Then, a burst of my chakra directly to your eyes immediately after the seal is gone will activate your Sharingan. And as soon as I'm free, I'll have a scant few seconds to send you back before I pass on permanently. Naruto gave it a funny look, but how is that benefiting you? You're still dying, so I don't see what your motivation is. Brat, the Kyuubi growled. Think of the big picture. Sending you back with your Sharingan should prevent me from needing to do this, so it's like this version of your life will have never happened, despite you having memories of it. In the end, if this is a success, I still live. Oh, Naruto said. So if I prevent Sasuke from killing us, then you won't die. Exactly, Kyuubi said. Now, on the count of 3, you destroy the seal. Ready? Naruto nodded. I don't really trust you, but that's the better of my options. Understandable. Now, we have little time. We must hurry. 1, 2, 3. Naruto awoke to the sound of a battle. Gingerly, he opened his eyes and, if he had been capable of it, would have let out a large gasp. He could see things in much better clarity than he ever thought possible. He could see the individual stitches in the white cloak of the man carrying him. He could see the delicate craftsmanship of the green jacket. If he turned his head to the side, he could easily see the trees pass him one by one instead of the blur they normally were. Surprised, he whispered a low, "Wow." But all that escaped his mouth was an excited gurgle. The man carrying him heard, and turned his own sapphire orbs towards Naruto's face, spiky blonde hair trailing down his cheeks. His gaze shot towards Naruto's eyes, then a prideful smile twitched onto his mouth. Oh, only a few hours old and you're already setting records, Naruto-kun? No one's ever activated the Sharingan at such a young age. Your mother would be proud. The fourth Hokage's tone dropped into a melancholy one, his face downtrodden. If only she could be here to see it. Naruto barely noticed the sorrowful side of the man carrying him before the smile returned, though it was forced, and his enthusiastic voice made an encore presentation. Well, Naruto-kun, you're about to go from being my son, Kazama Naruto, to being the hero of the village. Naruto felt his world shake and managed to catch a glimpse of orangish red beneath his father's feet. It felt strange to him, calling the man he respected above all others, father. But that's what the fourth Hokage, Kazama Arashi, was. He was Naruto's father, and nothing old ever changed that. Naruto immediately recognized the orangish red beneath his father's feet as Gamabunta, the boss toad. And he felt a bit of dread slide like ice down his throat and into his stomach. This was the night. The hero comment his father had made should have been a good enough clue, but the sounds of battle and the large summoned creature had finally solidified the date into his mind. It was October the 10th, his birthday, and the day that the legendary demon, Kyuubi no Yuko, had been defeated. And as they came upon the wretched beast, Naruto suddenly wished the ride could have lasted longer. It would have only prolonged the inevitable, but it would have made him feel a heck of a lot better. His fate was being decided, and there was nothing he could do about it. As his father began a set of seals, Naruto began to cry, completely on infantile impulse. The fourth Hokage gave his son a pained look, as though wishing he had another option, then returned to his duty, tears shining in his deep blue eyes. I'm sorry, son, but it has to be done. There's no other way. This is your story now. Then, for a second, as the Shinigami ripped the Kyuubi's soul from its body and stuffed it into Naruto's, there was silence. There was a long pause in everything. Kyuubi's corpse stood stock still, the Yondaime. The fourth Hokage only watched his son in the last moments of his life. The ninja of Konoha held their breath. Then it all came crashing back down as the fourth's body collapsed and an overwhelming pain racked Naruto's body. He could sense his Sharingan fade as the nerve endings in his stomach lit on fire, fueling the agonized cries bursting from his mouth. Then, everything went black. For the first 5 years after the Kyuubi's attack on Konoha, many of the villagers called for Naruto's death. On multiple occasions, drunken civilians had attacked him, ranting about ridding the village of the demon once and for all. The third Hokage, though he would never grant their wishes, could do nothing to protect the blonde-haired demon vessel. Konoha ninja that had witnessed the attacks had never interfered, simply because they had never had to. Every attack was foiled and turned out to be a complete failure. Naruto was still treated poorly, and still could only afford ramen, but his injuries had been avoided simply by not being there. For the most part, his life was going as it had originally, with only a few major differences. 1. Naruto had the Sharingan, and would often watch other ninjas, including Hitaki Kakashi and the Uchihas, as they practiced. With his Sharingan, he could copy some of the moves and jutsu they used. His repertoire of ninjutsu had vastly increased compared to his previous life, and he had new moves and jutsu that he could use in the more difficult parts of his life. Shunshin, body flicker, was a particular favorite of his. It made an excellent escape, even if it was very draining. Second, he knew the future, so he could prevent the more horrible events from happening, ones that he had the power to change and influence, anyway. This would come especially in handy with such things as his graduation and the Chunin exams. He knew he couldn't do anything about the Uchiha massacre or Sasuke receiving the curse mark that Orochimaru called the Heaven Seal, or the third Hokage's death. But he could prevent Sasuke from running away and the death of the mist duo known as Haku and Zabuza. Third, he knew about the Kyuubi, so he had even more reasons to prank the villagers. Many of the more vocal death callers, in other words, the people who had appealed for his execution, were already on the receiving end of almost malicious pranks. And he foresaw many more humiliating pranks in Konoha's future. Not to mention the level of training it gave him. Outrunning Junin was an amazing stealth exercise and a magnificent way to practice underhanded tactics. On December 27th, though, Naruto was suddenly reminded of an attempted kidnapping he had heard about. He couldn't remember who had originally told him. He thought it might have been Neji. Supposedly, one of the Cloud Ninja that had just arrived would try to kidnap Hinata. Hinata's dad, Hyuga Heishi, would catch them, and Cloud Village would demand the clan head's body as retribution for their ninja's murder. The Hyuga clan would give over Hisashi, Hiyashi's twin, instead, and the bird in a cage seal on Hisashi's head would keep the famous Byakugan in Konoha. But as a result, Hinata's confidence in herself would be brutally shattered, and Neji would hate her and the main family for the incident that killed his father, believing it their fault. Naruto, being the kind of person that he is, decided that he would attempt to stop the kidnapping, even if all he could do was boost Hinata's confidence. So, that night, he grabbed a sleeping bag, a package of instant ramen, a flashlight, and some firewood, and set up camp right outside the Hyuga compound. And he waited. He set up the firewood, lit a fire, boiled some instant ramen, ate it, then sat back down and waited. Naruto was never particularly fond of the Hyuga clan, considering what he had seen of it. Sure, he liked Hinata well enough, but the rest of the Hyuga were on his blacklist. Neji was particularly high up on Naruto's list of people he disliked, mainly for how he had treated Hinata, who had become a good friend of Naruto's. Now that he had sat down to think, Naruto found that he really liked Hinata. Sure, she was shy and quiet. She often stuttered and blushed a lot. She even fainted from time to time, especially when Naruto was around. But Hinata had done something that made Naruto proud of her, and that had made her one of Naruto's best friends. She had stood up against an opponent that was clearly stronger, and hadn't flinched, even when faced with death. To Naruto, that made her okay, and he happily welcomed her into his circle of friends. Thinking about Hinata put a smile on his face, and Naruto suddenly regretted not getting to know her earlier in his previous life. He had definitely missed out on a great sparring partner and a good friend, and maybe even, Naruto blushed, a girlfriend. Finally, around 2 in the morning, he could hear someone dashing out of the Hyuga compound. Setting his face with grim determination, he knew he wouldn't beat this guy. He activated his Sharingan and ran as fast as he could towards the noise. What he found was a shinobi dressed all in black leaping across the roofs of Konoha. Quickly shoving Chakra to his feet, he followed, pushing himself to catch up. His enemy was most certainly a fast one. It took a good while, at least 5 minutes, and he was nearing the walls of Konoha's defense. But with his dark-clad enemy in his sights, He set his hands in a cross-shaped seal, and mimed one of his favorite jutsu. His doppelganger attacked the shinobi with a hard punch to the skull, as if out of nowhere, forcing him to let go of the captive Hyuga princess. The real Naruto slid under the Cloud Nin and caught the girl with minimal ease, standing her on her own two legs. With a large amount of haste, he undid her bindings and pushed her away, towards her home. Go. You shouldn't have done that, the shinobi growled, free of the clone, forcing Naruto to turn and dodge a punch to the skull. The ninja scoffed, as if insulted, a 5-year-old? That's all they sent to stop me? He lashed out with a kick that hit Naruto in the stomach, forcing him backwards. A follow-up blow with his elbow sent the blonde's chin upwards and the shinobi grinned with satisfaction. He was beating the snot out of the little brat. Naruto jumped back slightly to avoid another much lazier kick. He took advantage of his opponent's lax guard and rushed forward, punching him. Or at least trying to. The shinobi, whomever it was, batted it away as if it was nothing, retaliating with a harsh punch to Naruto's stomach. Suddenly, the Naruto that the Cloud Ninja was fighting puffed into smoke, and he very well dreaded the words that reached his ears from behind him. The pit of his stomach nearly dropped out. Konoha's secret taijutsu technique, 1,000 years of pain. A quick, unexpected, and very hard poke in the ass sent the foreign ninja flying. He landed on the ground about 10 yards away, rubbing the offended body part. His ire was most definitely rising, and there was only one thing to take it out on. The Cloud Ninja scurried to his feet, massaging his hurt ass and his wounded ego. He was distracted, and it was the perfect opportunity for Naruto to take advantage of. Kaden, he whispered, flashing through hand seals. He stopped abruptly on Tiger and put his index finger and thumb to his lips, as he had seen Sasuke do many a time, Gukaku no Jutsu. Naruto's torso jerked forward and a large fireball burst forth, charging towards his enemy with amazing speed. The Cloud Nin seemed to understand the danger this technique presented and dodged out of the way, landing a few feet from the scorching flames. Naruto was suddenly in front of him, a grin plastered on his face. The Kumo shinobi was too shocked to dodge the kick delivered to his chin and went soaring upwards. With another amazing burst of speed, Naruto was behind him. Using his enemy's body, Naruto flipped around in midair, sending a kick to the ninja's stomach. It was blocked easily. You're gonna have to do better than that, kid. Naruto used the block to add speed and power to his twist, turning 180 degrees. His fist came crashing down into his opponent's face. With only a few feet between them and solid earth, Naruto brought his right heel down onto the ninja's stomach with a devastating kick, sending him straight to the ground. He rolled onto his stomach, groaning. Naruto landed not too far away and tried to dive onto the man's back, but was too slow, and got a kick in the stomach in return. It was hard enough to send him soaring, until he collided with the wall of a random house, forcing a crater into the brick. He was extremely lucky that he had thrown up a wall of chakra in his back to prevent damaged bones, but it still hurt like hell, and he knew that he had lost. All he could do was wait for the end as his Sharingan faded. He distinctly heard a cry of pain and a dull thud as something heavy hit the ground. Someone was panting, out of breath from a sudden spontaneous exertion. It was deep and low, so it had to be a man. He looked up to see his opponent on the ground, dead, with a pissed-looking Hyuga Heishi standing above the corpse. Naruto felt a smirk stretch across his lips, then laughed and shot a victorious grin at the fallen form of his enemy. It was never about stopping you, jackass, it was about stalling until the pissed Hyugas came and whipped your ass. Naruto felt his muscles protest as his limited chakra settled down again. Heishi pulled him from the rubble and helped him stand, a grateful look on his face. Naruto winced as a few of his joints cracked. It seems we have you to thank for my daughter's rescue. Oname wa, what is your name? Naruto grinned foxily. Boku no name wa Uzumaki Naruto Dezu. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. And it was nothing. Couldn't let Hinata-san get kidnapped, could I? Heishi gave him a once-over when he heard the name, then smiled and declared, no, I guess you couldn't. But how did you know? Naruto blushed. Well, you see, Heishi smirked. So it was your sleeping bag outside the compound? Whatever for? Well, I didn't completely trust the foreign ninja. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Heishi seemed skeptical of his story, especially around Hinata-chan. Oh, so it's Hinata-chan now, is it? Heishi grinned a sly grin. Ah, well, Naruto stuttered, his blush darkening. I was watching her birthday party. She just seemed like a really nice person, so. Well, Heishi said, if you think so highly of my daughter, how about I introduce you? Say hi, Hinata-chan. Hinata peeped out from behind her father, buried her face in his pants leg, and uttered a meek, Konnichiwa, Naruto-kun. Naruto grinned, despite the bruises, Konbanwa, Hinata-chan, good evening. An awkward silence befell the group, and Naruto suddenly wished he could disappear. But he knew that the Hyuga clan was very formal, and that him disappearing would be very suspicious. Heishi was the one who finally broke the silence. Well, Naruto-san, what do you say we take you to the Hyuga infirmary to get patched up? Naruto did a short bow. Arigato, demo, thank you, but I heal very quickly. These bruises will be gone by morning. Truly, I am very grateful for the offer, Heishi-sama, but I must decline. Well, if you insist. As Hyuga clan branch members flooded the area, Heishi turned around and prepared to walk home. I hope to see you again, Naruto-san. Oyasumi Nasai, good night. Heishi started walking. Hinata, whose gaze was still on Naruto, stayed where she was. A blush spread across her face, and she suddenly dashed forward, planting a soft kiss on Naruto's cheek. With a soft, Oyasumi Nasai, Naruto-kun, she rushed to catch up with her father. A goofy grin spread across his face as Naruto waved. Then, before the branch member's eyes, he disappeared in a flicker of yellow. Shunshin no jutsu, people, not Hiraishin. The after-effects of his meddling soon became obvious to Naruto. With his father dead, Neji loathed the main branch even more. And this time, he loathed Naruto for his part in the Cloud Ninja's death. Hinata was slightly bolder, but she still blushed and stuttered around Naruto. He had no idea why. Heishi treated Naruto with the utmost respect every time Naruto visited Hinata. Naruto and Hinata were probably the only ones keeping Heishi sane after his wife died giving birth to Hinata's little sister, Hanabi. With his wife and brother dead, his nephew Neji thirsty for his blood, and the clan council trying to dictate his every move, Heishi found it difficult to keep a lid on his quickly shortening temper. But with Hinata's kindness, and Naruto's happy and easygoing attitude, he managed to keep himself in check. On his 6th birthday, Naruto received 3 gifts in all. 2 were from the 3rd Hokage, and the 3rd was from Hinata, which Heishi had taken upon himself to deliver. It had been quite a pleasant surprise to find the ever-busy Hyuga Heishi standing on his doorstep with a neatly wrapped gift in his hand and happy smile on his face. The 3rd's first gift had been a note telling him that he had been accepted to the Ninja Academy. He had expected it. He had gotten the same gift the first time around. It was the 3rd's second gift that had surprised him. Weights. The Sandame had gotten him wrist and ankle weights. They were black and looked like simple 2-inch wide wrist, ankle bands. They were adjustable, so Naruto could easily change the weight of them. Hinata's gift had been very unexpected, or rather, Hinata's gifts had been rather unexpected. She had gotten him a pair of black goggles, very similar to the green ones he had worn in his original life. In the same box, there were a few sets of the same clothes. 5 black t-shirts, all with the Sharingan Tomo design stitched into the back with white silk, and 5 pairs of Enbu-style pants, which included the ankle wraps. 2 ninja utility belts joined the rest of the clothing. A couple 100,000 yen and a note were packed neatly beneath it all. The note briefly explained that he could use the yen to buy larger clothes when he grew out of them. All packed in the same box. After shortly worrying about the Sharingan design, he hid it with a genjutsu, and packed all but one set into his closet. It was as he was nearing his 7th birthday that Naruto was feeling a bit nervous and on the edge. The Uchiha massacre was set to happen soon, and he knew he couldn't do anything about it. Regardless of that, he had taken to following Sasuke home every day. He knew he couldn't defeat Itachi or stop the massacre, but he would be there to pick up the pieces when it happened. It was a dark, Halloween night when the devastating bloodbath occurred. Upon sighting the first body, Naruto had found the best hiding spot he could, and waited for the events to unfold. He cringed with every scream, knowing that Sasuke was suffering at Itachi's hands. He winced at Itachi's cold voice and flinched when an agonized cry tore through the night sky. He stiffened as he saw Itachi dash by, headed for Konoha's outer walls. He waited, and as soon as he was sure the Uchiha murderer had left and was far enough away, he moved from his hiding place and cancelled the genjutsu hiding the design on the back of his shirt. Very carefully, he crept towards the sound of pitiful crying. The bodies littering the ground made it hard for him to walk around, and his nose stung with the coppery scent of blood, but he walked on, careful not to disturb the corpses beneath his feet. He found the source of the weeping curled up in front of an Uchiha home, soaked with blood not his own. 7-year-old Sasuke was leaning up against the wall, tear-filled eyes wide and peeking out above his knees. His arms were wrapped tightly around his shins, and his arched back heaved with every strained breath. His black shirt was rumpled and wrinkled, clinging to his form with sweat and the unending river of crimson liquid. His lean, young arms trembled and his obsidian eyes stared straight ahead, unseeing. As Naruto slowly approached him, he activated his incomplete Sharingan, and held back the bile that rose in his throat. He concluded, quite decisively, that he didn't want to be looking at the scene of a massacre in such detail. He knelt down, placing a gentle hand on Sasuke's shaking shoulder. Sasuke's head whipped around, and his eyes focused on Naruto with light speed. Naruto noticed the frightened look in Sasuke's eyes and quickly turned off his Sharingan. He sighed in relief as the darkness hid the majority of the massacre. "Hey," Naruto whispered, shaking Sasuke lightly, "let's get out of here." Sasuke didn't move. "Are you Uchiha?" he asked timidly. "I thought I was the last one." "Yeah," Naruto said, "but you're not alone anymore. We're the last ones alive, but at least we've got each other. Your cousin Naruto won't leave you alone in all this." Sasuke smiled weakly. Thank you. You're not alone, Sasuke. And you never will be ever again." Naruto smiled. "Now let's get out of here. Hokage-sama will know what to do." Sasuke nodded, and tried to stand. His knees trembled for a few seconds, then he collapsed back onto his butt. Naruto sighed and helped him up, slinging the boy's right arm over his shoulders. With a one-handed seal, they disappeared in a flicker of black. Sandame's breath caught in his throat as a mass of black, red, and yellow landed in his office with a thud and two loud, "Ouch." He stood from his chair as a crimson liquid seeped onto the pristine floors of his office. The mass, or maybe masses would be more appropriate, that had appeared in his office sat up with a groan. A blonde-haired boy rubbed his head, grinning at the old man. "Hey, Oja-san." Hokage-sama," Sasuke stuttered. Sandame sighed. "Naruto. What brings you here?" Naruto pulled up 2 chairs. He sat Sasuke down in one and sat in the other himself. "The rest of the Uchiha are dead. I witnessed Uchiha Itachi leaving the scene of the crime. When I heard the sounds of distress, I investigated and found Sasuke-kun suffering from severe mental trauma." Sandame blinked as his mind registered the information. Then it sunk in just what he had said, and his face turned serious. "Where?" "The Uchiha compound," Naruto said, suppressing a shudder. "There are bodies everywhere." Sandame turned on the intercom and spoke to his secretary, "Send in Kakashi." The third sat down again and waited, his hands folded in front of his mouth. Sasuke drifted off to sleep, still covered in blood, but comforted by his cousin's presence. Naruto fidgeted, impatient. Finally, after 15 minutes, a dog-masked Anbu walked through the door. He strode up to the third's desk and bent forward at his midsection. "You called, Hokage-sama?" Sandame nodded. "Yes, Kakashi. Naruto-kun here," he motioned towards Naruto, "has just brought me the most disturbing news. It seems that Uchiha Itachi has massacred his clan. Sasuke-kun," his hand pointed at the sleeping boy, "is reported to be the only survivor." "No, he's not," Naruto said, his eyes closed. They opened slowly, revealing 2 red orbs swirling with the Sharingan. "My mother's heritage marks me as an Uchiha as well. I am the second survivor of this genocide." "When?" Sandame stuttered. "How?" Kakashi asked. Naruto sighed, dredging up the lie he had prepared. "The events of my mother's death caused me emotional stress. Even at such a young age, I seem to understand the depth of the situation. The addition of the burden my father placed on me on the same day, mere minutes later, forced me into a sort of panic. My Sharingan activated as a result of that stress, and, until that overwhelming pain of the seal knocked me out, I could see with much more clarity. It's why I can remember that night so well." "How often did you use it?" Sandaime asked, leaning forward. Every day, when no one was noticing. I'd watch ninja spars until I ran low on chakra. I can't use most of them, though. Don't have enough chakra. Kakashi snapped his fingers in an, I get it, way, so that's why the villagers had such a hard time catching you. You evaded them using the Sharingan. It also explains your knowledge of jutsu as well as your developed vocabulary. Back to the matter at hand, Sandaime said, reigning Kakashi's moment of discovery. The Uchiha clan has been murdered and I want you and your team to investigate the scene. Dismissed. Kakashi bowed quickly, hi, Hokage-sama, and swiftly left the room. Old man, Sandaime turned his attention back to Naruto. I want you to keep my bloodline quiet for now. And I'm going to need a bigger apartment for Sasuke and I. The third blinked, what do you mean? Naruto glanced at the raven-haired Uchiha. Sasuke's unstable right now. He needs someone from his family to support him. And I'm the only one left. As for the apartment, us living in the Uchiha compound would only make things worse for Sasuke. It would imprint bad memories in his mind and he'd relive this horrible event every day. It'd be better if we just found a big enough apartment. Sandaime nodded, I understand. I'll have one for you tomorrow. For now, you can sleep here. I'll stay all night to watch over you. Naruto nodded as the old Hokage buzzed his intercom. I'm going to need a few futons in here. I'll also need 3 blankets and 2 small yukata. Hi, Hokage-sama, the secretary replied. The old man shook his head, a smile twitching on his lips. Despite the situation, you'll make a great Hokage someday, Naruto. Naruto grinned foxily, I know. The next 5 years went by in a flash for Naruto, and as he looked back on it, he found he was quite content with the results of his meddling. Granted, Neji was worse off this time, and the Uchiha clan was still down to 3 members, but, overall, things had taken a turn for the better. Hinata was still quite shy around Naruto, and she blushed and stuttered very often. But being friends with Naruto had made Hinata a stronger person, and Naruto easily noticed how much more powerful she was during their spars. She had come very far with her Juken, and had started working on the Kaden when she turned 11. Naruto was very eager to train with her so that he could eliminate her chances of losing to Neji. They were the best of friends. Though Naruto felt oddly happy and lightheaded every time she smiled at him, he was still trying to figure out why. After merely a year of living together with Sasuke, Naruto immediately saw some of himself rubbing off on the dark-haired Uchiha. He really should have guessed it would happen, considering they were practically inseparable, but it still surprised him. Sasuke, the original Sasuke, had been broody and sulking and often stayed quiet, except for the occasional insult and such. This new Sasuke, who was carefree and happy, could be found pulling pranks with Naruto. Many of Tei victims had taken to calling them Densetsu Teki na Uzumaki Kyodai, or the legendary Uzumaki brothers. Naruto had never realized how useful 2 pairs of Sharingan eyes would be in pulling pranks until Sasuke had started participating in the all-out war against the hateful villagers. Iruka had punished them countless times for innumerable pranks, especially when he wound up with lipstick, blush, and eyeliner on his face, and a blonde wig on his head. Hinata never participated in their pranks, and she was never a target of them, but Naruto could often hear her giggling at them. For his 7th birthday, Hinata had gotten him a few D-ranked jutsu scrolls, with techniques like Kawarimi and Hange on them. Heishi had thrown in a few free Ichiraku ramen coupons. The 3rd Hokage had given him kunai and shuriken. Hinata gave Naruto several scrolls on stealth for his 8th birthday, and the 3rd had given him higher settings for his weights, explaining how a genjutsu ninjutsu hybrid melded the metal weights into the little black bands. Needless to say, Naruto was a little confused. For his 9th birthday, Sasuke had taken Naruto into the Uchiha compound to find the traditional jutsu scrolls. They had been most successful. Hinata had given him more scrolls on genin-level jutsu, and the 3rd had continued to give him weights. On his 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th birthdays, Hinata, Heishi, Sasuke, and the Sandaime had run out of things to give him, besides Ichiraku coupons, so they had simply thrown him a huge party, inviting everyone who treated Naruto the way he deserved to be treated. That meant that Kakashi, Sasuke, Sarutobi, Hinata, and Heishi were the only ones that attended. The parties had been small, but Naruto had loved them nonetheless. Naruto panted as he ran from the scene of his crime, a can of black paint swinging from his left hand. Sasuke was running behind him, a can of red paint sloshing beneath his fingers. "Get back here, Naruto! Stop now, Sasuke!" Naruto and Sasuke laughed excitedly, letting the paint cans fly behind them, where they collided with and spilled over two of the Chunin chasing them. The troublemaking duo rounded a fence and flew down the alleyway. The remaining Chunin followed, dashing past the yellow wooden walls of the fence around them. An outline suddenly appeared on a section of the fence and a piece of cloth painted to look like a fence fell forward, revealing a grinning Naruto and Sasuke. "Idiots!" Naruto and Sasuke chuckled quietly. They turned around, still staring at the disappearing backs of their pursuers. Then they whipped their heads around and ran in the opposite direction. But they barely made it 3 inches before they collided with a green-clothed chest. Both fell backwards, landing on their posteriors with their heads down, staring at the dirt street. Naruto swallowed the lump in his throat and looked up, mirrored by Sasuke. Iruka stood in front of them, a disapproving glare set about his stern face. His mouth was twisted upside down in a disappointed frown, and his eyebrows were knit together at the center of his forehead, right above his nose. His hands rested on his hips in a reprimanding sort of way, and his nostrils seemed to flare. "Iruka-sensei, we can explain," Sasuke stuttered. Naruto nodded. "Yeah, it was all in the name of good fun." The blonde's head was bobbing up and down. Iruka bent forward and opened his mouth. "Fools." Naruto and Sasuke were tied up in front of the class, and everyone was staring at them. Many members of the Sasuke fan club would tell you what a bad influence Naruto had been on Sasuke, and the very minute Naruto fan club would argue that Naruto's influence had been a good thing for Sasuke. "Tomorrow is the Academy's graduation exam. You, Naruto, have failed the last 2 times," Iruka shouted, jabbing his finger into the blonde's chest. "This is no time to be causing trouble, you morons." Both Naruto and Sasuke scoffed, as they had many a time before. Yeah. Iruka's eyebrow twitched and he turned to the class. "Time for a review of the Henge no Jutsu. Line up, and transform perfectly into me." The class groaned, but did as they were told and lined up. Everyone, including Sasuke, pulled it off without trouble, but it was not to be so when Naruto took his turn. With a hand seal and a puff of smoke, Naruto disappeared, revealing a perfect image of Iruka standing in his place. Naruto grinned and turned around to wave at the class. Immediately, Iruka noticed a "kick me" sign on Naruto's back, and felt a vein throb in his temple. Naruto. A fist came down and whacked Naruto atop the head, releasing the transformation. "Ow!" Naruto cried, rubbing the developing bump on his cranium. He turned around and pouted at Iruka, "But Iruka-sensei, it was perfect, go ahead and look at your back." Iruka reached behind him with his free hand and pulled off the piece of paper he felt there. He brought it in front of him, examining the words written on it. "Kick me." Iruka and his super-sensitive teacher's hearing heard a snicker, and his head whipped around to focus on Sasuke, whose hands were plastered in front of his mouth to hide the giggling that threatened to burst from his lips. Iruka felt his eyebrow twitch again. Iruka smirked at the 2 boys below him. "You 2 aren't going home till it's all clean." "Don't care," Naruto grumbled. Sasuke scowled. "It's not like we have much to go home to." Iruka's smirk melted into a frown and he contemplated something for a second. "Hey guys, clean this up quick, and I'll take you out for ramen." Naruto and Sasuke turned to each other and grinned secretly. They had conned Iruka into buying them ramen again. Naruto sped through the forest. Things were going almost exactly as he remembered them to be. At least, on this night. Sasuke had gone home after learning of his failure. He knew that Naruto needed his space when he got upset. Right after Sasuke had left, Mizuki had joined him on his swing and told him of the alternate way to graduate. Naruto had played along. Hook, line, and sinker. He had easily stolen the scroll of forbidden seals. All he had to do was use the old man's perverseness against him. It only took a hand seal, a puff of smoke, and a little of forbidden flesh to knock the aged Hokage out cold. The entirety of the security around the scroll was quickly bypassed, and Naruto had left before anyone could figure out what had happened. The most interesting thing he had found was something called the Hiraishin no Jutsu, and he had quickly found out that it was his father's most powerful ninjutsu. That alone was reason enough to read about it. This jutsu was created by the fourth Hokage. To activate it, the user needs a special seal or jutsu formula, jutsu shiki, to mark the destination. After this is done, the user can travel almost instantaneously to that location. The fourth applied this jutsu shiki in advance to small weapons such as kunai. It is possible to leave a formula on an area touched by the user. Naruto grinned, pulling out the marker he had brought specifically for the occasion. A blank scroll was slipped secretly from out of his kunai pouch and unrolled next to the forbidden scroll of seals. In what seemed to be no time at all, every detail concerning the Hiraishin was carefully inscribed on the previously blank scroll, and Naruto held enough of an understanding of the technique to recite the most useful jutsu shiki by heart. With both scrolls put away, Naruto eagerly pulled out kunai, inscribing a jutsu shiki on each of them. He left no single knife untouched and unaltered, and, in the end, probably had enough kunai to stop an army. Now, the only problem he had was chakra. Naruto sighed. It was going to take a long time to get his reserves up so high again. He looked up to the large tree in front of him. Well, he told himself, if you want to succeed, you have to try. Naruto panted. It had taken the better part of the day, but he had done it. The large tree behind him had slash marks decorating its front, each a few inches apart. The distance between the marks quickly grew, and, about halfway up the tree, the marks were easily 3 feet apart from one another. There was a funny prickling on the back of Naruto's head, and he quickly dropped into his act. He had to reenact his graduation almost perfectly, lest he change something vital. It would not do for something to go wrong so far into his second chance. Naruto looked up as Iruka landed in front of him, a creepy look on his face. "I've found you." Naruto scratched the back of his head, laughing nervously. "Heh, yeah, you found me. I only had a chance to learn one jutsu." Iruka's eyes trailed over Naruto's form, noticing rips and frayed patches in the fabric of his black t-shirt. "You've been working hard. What have you been doing?" Naruto giggled excitedly. "Never mind that. If I show you this really cool jutsu, you'll let me graduate." Iruka blinked. "What gave you that idea?" Naruto grinned. "Mizuki-sensei." Naruto patted the large scroll on his back. "He also told me where to find this scroll. He said that if I mastered one jutsu on here, you'd let me graduate." Iruka's mouth fell open. "Mizuki started this." A whooshing sound fell onto their ears, and a barrage of kunai fell upon them as if on cue. Naruto, as prepared as he was, could not prevent Iruka from pushing him away and taking the blow for himself. Iruka raised his arms to defend himself and was pushed against the hut by the rain of throwing knives. A soft rustle of leaves brought everyone's attention to the other end of the clearing, where Mizuki sat on a branch. A smirk was plastered to his lips and 2 large shuriken were strapped to his back. The super-sized throwing stars clanged lightly as he let out a dark chuckle. "Good job finding him, Iruka." "I see," Iruka spat, tugging a kunai from his shoulder. "So that's what's going on." "Naruto," Mizuki's malicious smile disappeared. "Give me the scroll." "No matter what." Iruka pulled another knife from his shoulder. "Naruto, don't give him the scroll. He used you to get his dirty hands on it." An evil grin stretched across the silver-haired man's face. "Naruto," Mizuki said in a sing-song voice, "there's no point in you having the scroll. Let me tell you the truth." "No, Mizuki," Iruka shouted in protest. "Don't." Mizuki's smirk widened into a maniacal grin and his voice was slightly giddy. 12 years ago, the demon fox Kyuubi was sealed. And ever since that event, a new rule was created, a rule that everyone knows but you, because, Naruto, you were never meant to know it. "Oh?" Naruto asked, eyes icy blue. "What rule?" "That no one is allowed to speak of the fact." Mizuki's eyes widened excitedly. "That you are the 9-tailed demon fox that killed Iruka's parents and nearly destroyed the village. You were sealed up by the Hokage you admire." Mizuki's voice rose. "And everybody hates you." Naruto snorted, ruining Mizuki's speech. "You're full of it. You think I didn't know about the demon?" Mizuki's face grew confused. "Huh?" Naruto chuckled. "I've known about the demon fox since forever. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore a seal stuck to your stomach, isn't it?" But, Mizuki stuttered. "No." Naruto shook his head, hands on his hips. The question is, what do we do with you? What? Mizuki asked, alarmed. Naruto snapped his fingers. Ah, I know. A cross-shaped seal later, and a couple hundred shadow clones surrounded the clearing. Each of them was grinning, eyes closed mischievously. They were there to prevent Mizuki's escape. The original blonde used the traitor's distraction with his doppelgangers to call upon a fraction of the Kyuubi's Yuki. It sparked through his system, helping to replenish his own chakra. It helped restore his energy reserves and he felt much better than he had 5 minutes ago. With most of his chakra back, Naruto's hands slipped through 4 hand seals. Chakra soon gathered around his right hand, and Naruto grasped his right forearm with his left hand. The chakra peeled off his skin in fiery waves. Taiyushin Itu Tansen, Naruto whispered. The chakra fluctuated, changing to a deep, burning red. The new flames crackled, but Naruto's body remained untouched by their intensity. Mizuki backed away into the awaiting grasp of 2 Naruto clones. He could do nothing to stop them from grabbing his arms and keeping him pinned to his position. Naruto's icy gaze bore into Mizuki's eyes. You have endangered the life of a Konoha shinobi. You have threatened the safety of the village itself. You have turned traitor and abandoned your country. Now I am your judge. I am your jury. I am your executioner. Fear crept onto the traitor's face, and no. Why, you're the dead last. Naruto's flaming fist crashed into Mizuki's chest, burning away his shirt and flak jacket. The flames exploded outward, burning skin and cloth away from the man's torso. In a matter of seconds, the only clothing on the rogue ninja's body were the sleeves of his shirt and his pants. Charred skin lay where the rest was supposed to be. Mizuki screamed and fell backwards, dead to the world. Naruto wiped the sweat from his brow as the fire disappeared. In a disinterested tone, he added, "The damage to your skin isn't nearly as bad as it feels." The blonde ninja turned and swaggered back to Iruka as his clones disappeared. A smile on his face. "Are you okay, Iruka-sensei?" Iruka smiled back. "Close your eyes, Naruto." Naruto closed his eyes and held his breath, his heart beating erratically. He could feel his goggles being pulled from his head, then a piece of cloth being tied above his eyebrows. He couldn't help the grin that stretched across his face. "Okay," Iruka said, "you can open your eyes, and congratulations on graduating." Naruto felt his eyes water, despite knowing that he was going to graduate anyway. Tears trickled down his cheeks and he threw himself into Iruka's arms. "Iruka-sensei." Naruto was in a place he quite easily recognized. It is kind of hard to forget about it when it's the place where your inner demon lives, isn't it? The blonde ninja waded quickly through the flood, water sloshing about his knees. He ignored each door and alternate hallway he passed. He knew where he was going, and could find his way even without the ominous red glow. When he came upon his destination, he drew in a breath and passed into the large cavern, preparing himself to meet the great Kyuubi for the first time. The sight that met his eyes wasn't any different than he remembered it. The walls were still dirty, the floor still one massive puddle, and the sturdy barrier of bars was just as strong and powerful as he first saw. Naruto braced himself as one huge, gigantic red eye opened behind the makeshift cage, zeroing in on his small form. He suppressed a shudder. Being in its presence could do that to anyone. "Brat," a deep voice growled, coming from the general direction of the eye. "What do you want? You're disturbing my sleep." Naruto crossed his arms and glared at the figure behind the bars. "You could have given me more chakra, you know. I could barely stand after I used my new jutsu." The voice chuckled. "So you noticed, did you? Congratulations, brat. You're not as dumb as I thought you were." "Look, Fuzzy," Naruto ignored the warning growl, "if we're gonna survive this whole thing, you better give me all the chakra I ask for. Because if I die, you die, and withholding your chakra could get us both killed." "You've got guts, brat," the beast admitted grudgingly, "and you've got a point too. So I'll go along with you, for now." 2 days later, the sun shone brightly as Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke walked down the streets of Konoha together. Each had a happy smile on their face and a spring in their step as the academy came into view. Sasuke wore his usual attire, the clothes he originally wore in canon. Naruto was in something similar to what Itachi had worn daily. A bigger version of the black shirt Hinata had gotten him was tucked into his Anbu pants and a ninja utility belt hung around his waist. White Anbu armor was strapped tightly to his torso, stolen from Itachi. Stash. On his right arm, he wore a strap-on sleeve like Sasuke. One of those things that was on Sasuke's arms in his original anime outfit. It disappeared into his right sleeve. His left arm was wrapped in bandages, much like Lee's. They too vanished into his sleeve. On the back of his shirt, hidden by genjutsu and his new armor, was the Uchiha clan symbol, smack dab in the center of the white tome design. As the duo reached their destination, Naruto slid the doors open and walked in, followed shortly by Sasuke. Many people crowded the desks, and quite a few waved to Sasuke and Naruto, but they weren't interested. The Uchiha cousins walked through the aisles and stopped halfway down the classroom. They took a seat. Naruto was between Hinata and Sasuke. Sasuke sat at the last space on the desk. It served him best. No fangirls could sit next to him. Out of the three of them, Hinata seemed to have changed the most. She still wore a coat over top of her ninja attire, and her pants were still black. But her deep indigo hair was long and cascaded over her shoulders and down across her back. Her bangs were still neatly cropped right above her eyebrows, and she was still a bit shy and quiet, but she was more confident in herself and her abilities. Winning Naruto's love didn't seem impossible anymore. Ino and Sakura's entrance went unnoticed, and then things quieted down. Iruka entered the room and everyone immediately shut up. Not a whisper escaped their mouths as the teacher began his graduation speech. Naruto tuned out the speech. He had ignored it the first time. He could ignore it again. He was only half listening when Iruka called the teams, and he really didn't expect it to change. But it had. Team 7. Hyuga Hinata, Uchiha Sasuke, Uzumaki Naruto. Iruka shouted, his eyes traveling down the list. Team 8. Inazuka Kiba, Haruno Sakura, Aburame Shino. Naruto's cheek slipped off his palm and his chin collided with the desk. His eyes were wide open now, and even though it had hurt to hit his chin, he was totally ignorant of the pain. His surprise soon vanished, replaced with elation. He let out a whoop of joy, hugging the two people next to him with a fervor unrivaled. Hinata blushed and Sasuke scowled, though his lips would twitch every now and then. Many of Sasuke's fangirls squealed angrily, obviously upset they couldn't be with their Sasuke-kun. But to Naruto, none of those things mattered. His motivation behind the hug had been totally different. Fate had changed, and this time, it was for the better. Naruto hit a gulp as the killing intent of multiple fangirls rested onto him and Hinata. Maybe, though, it was for the worst. 3 hours had passed since lunchtime, and only Team 7 was left sitting in the lonely classroom. Naruto had his head resting on his arms, a bored look on his face. Hinata sat on his right, a light blush on her cheeks, sneaking glances when she thought Naruto wasn't looking. Sasuke sat on Naruto's left, eyes half closed with his chin resting in his right palm. Naruto sighed, there's only one person who could be anywhere near this late. Sasuke nodded, yup. Kakashi, they said in unison. Then they both sighed. They had grown up knowing Kakashi and his tardiness. It had always been a pet peeve for them, and Kakashi delighted in angering them. 20 minutes later, Naruto and Sasuke were snoring lightly, drool trailing down their chins. The classroom door opened, but Hinata was the only one who noticed. The silver-haired man known as Kakashi peered in, his gaze settling on the two sleeping boys. Naruto, he noted, wore clothing that was disturbingly familiar. He smirked. Well, I guess I can see why people would call them the legendary Uzumaki brothers. They don't do anything alone, do they? Hinata blinked. Anyo, sensei, you're late. Kakashi chuckled beneath his mask. Wake up those two and meet me on the roof. Team 7 sat assembled on the roof of the academy. Naruto and Sasuke yawned, rubbing their eyes. All right, Kakashi said, leaning up against the railing, let's start off with some introductions. You know, likes, dislikes, dreams for the future. Naruto frowned sleepily. Why don't you go first, sensei? Kakashi shrugged. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. My likes and dislikes are none of your business. Dreams for the future, well, I have a lot of hobbies. The gray-haired Junin pointed to Naruto. Your turn, Blondie. Naruto yawned, scratching his stomach. Name's Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen, Hinata-chan, my cousin Sasuke, and training. What I dislike are those who judge others unfairly. Dreams for the future. He thought for a second, helping Sasuke take revenge for our clan, and to become the greatest Hokage ever. Hobbies, he grinned, pulling pranks with Sasuke and sparring with Hinata-chan. Kakashi nodded, pointing to Sasuke. Next. Sasuke rubbed his right eye. My name is Yan Uchiha Sasuke. I like ramen, fire jutsu, my cousin Naruto, and training. Yan. I dislike people who judge others based on face value. Hobbies? Sasuke scratched his chin, pulling pranks on the ignorant villagers and training my Sharingan with Naruto. My dream, avenge my clan and revive it, and help my cousin reach the top. Kakashi blinked. That was unexpected. Slightly unnerved, Kakashi pointed to Hinata. Your turn. Anyo, Hinata said. My name is Hyuga Hinata. I'll like Naruto-kun, Sasuke-san, and sparring with Naruto-kun. I dislike others who judge people unjustly. My hobbies are pressing flowers, and training to become a medic nin. My dreams for the future? Anyo, she blushed, staring at Naruto. I can't say. Kakashi resisted the urge to arch an eyebrow. So she likes Naruto, Right then, Kakashi said, standing straight, his hands in his pockets. Tomorrow we'll begin with some survival training. Sasuke and Naruto sighed, but Hinata spoke up for them. Anyo, sensei, we already did that at the academy. Kakashi leaned against the railing and chuckled, his eye closed. His voice had an I know something you don't know tone to it. You guys are gonna flip. You see, the academy test is just to see if you have what it takes to be genin. The real test is administered by us Junin sensei. Kakashi leered at the newly formed Team 7, an evil gleam in his eye, and that test has a failure rate of 66.66%. He turned, taking a small moment to enjoy the looks on their faces. Bring your ninja gear tomorrow. And don't eat breakfast, you'll puke. Are you sure this wise, Heishi-sama? They're only kids. Sandame sat with his hands folded in front of his mouth, elbows propped up on his desk. He was in a conference with Hyuga Heishi, Hinata's father. Heishi sighed, as much as I hate to force this upon them, it must be done. Naruto-kun needs the protection of a clan, and the only clan capable of providing adequate protection for him is the Hyuga. If I could adopt him into the clan any other way, I would have, but this is the only method I could slip past the elders with. I don't need their approval to set up a marriage. The third Hokage sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Naruto-kun will not be happy about this. I don't think Hinata-san will be either. Naruto-kun and Hinata-chan are already good friends, Heishi assured him. They may find it awkward at first, but they will adapt to being married quite easily. They probably would have been engaged to one another in 4 years anyway. What do you mean? The third had a good idea what he meant, but he wanted confirmation. Heishi sat back, folding his hands in his lap. I have noticed that Hinata-chan and Naruto-kun are very fond of one another, more so than any best friend ever is. In 4 years, they could legally marry without any of the repercussions they might have encountered earlier. I suspect they would have done so. Sandame sighed. So that was why you wanted them on the same team? Yes, Heishi nodded. It will help with their integration into marriage 4 years from now. I don't like it very much, Sandame admitted, but I will allow it. Just make sure to take care of any problems before you go through with it, Heishi-sama. Heishi stood and bowed. Thank you, Sarutobi-sama. The 3 would-be genin of Team 7 waited impatiently where their sensei had told them to wait. Normally, this might not have made much sense, since they would only be waiting a few minutes. But this team was different. This team had Hitaki Kakashi for a teacher, and he was known to be chronically late to everything. So, naturally, they had been waiting for about 3 hours. Kakashi walked into the clearing, a backpack strapped to his torso. He smiled at them, and waved. Hey guys, good morning. You're late. Sasuke and Naruto shouted, pointing at the tall Junin. The gray-haired man ignored them and set an alarm clock on one of the posts. He poked it and it dinged, then started ticking. Kakashi turned back to them. It's set for noon. He held up 2 bells. You have until then to take these from me. That is your task for today. If you don't get a bell, say goodbye to lunch, he continued. I'll tie you up to one of those logs and eat in front of you. Those who get no bell fail and get sent back to the academy. That will be at least one of you. Kakashi tied the bells to his belt loop, you'll have to come at me with the intent to kill. Ready. He paused, set, go. The three genin all jumped away, kicking up a cloud of dust, except Naruto. Kakashi's sweat dropped. You're an odd one. Naruto chuckled. The only thing odd here is your hair. Kakashi looked at Naruto in a calculating way. He has the Sharingan, as well as a large repertoire of jutsu. I won't be able to read with him around. Naruto stared at Kakashi, then grinned, unstrapping something on his forearms and ankles. 4 black pieces of cloth fell to the earth, leaving meter-wide craters in the earth. Kakashi's sweat dropped again. Oh. Now, Naruto said, his grin widening, I'm ready. Kakashi had to double take when Naruto disappeared before him, his eye wide with surprise. What? A black tornado surrounded the Junin, flecked with blonde and peach. A blur suddenly flew from the circular pattern, striking the distracted Kakashi in the jaw before rejoining the miniature cyclone. Regaining his bearings, Kakashi pulled 2 figures from the whirlwind, forcing it to dissipate. He chuckled, not as great as you thought, huh? He slammed one of the Narutos into the ground, where it puffed into smoke. The second Naruto broke free from Kakashi's grasp while the elite ninja was concentrated on his other. He tried to send a roundhouse kick into the man's chin, only to have Kakashi duck at the last second. With Naruto's back exposed to him, Kakashi set his hands into a seal, an evil gleam in his eyes. Konoha's secret taijutsu technique, 1,000 years of pain. A powerful ass poke sent Naruto flying, bursting into smoke a few yards from his sensei. Kakashi's eyebrow rose. A clone? Got it? Sasuke and Hinata nodded. Naruto grinned. Good. Are you sure this will work, Naruto-kun? Hinata was slightly apprehensive. Kakashi was a Junin after all. Sasuke smirked. He knew that none of Naruto's plans failed. The combination of Sharingan and Naruto's natural cunning assured victory. Naruto grinned. Of course, Hinata-chan. Kakashi looked up from his book as Hinata rushed from the trees, launching a palm strike towards his stomach. Kakashi easily dodged it, but was unprepared for punch that struck his head. Sasuke giggled impishly. Never let your guard down, sensei. Well, the Junin said in an approving tone, it appears you two have grasped the meaning of the exercise. But where's? The 3 shinobi jumped out of the path of a large fireball as it barreled towards them, courtesy of Naruto. The blonde grinned at them. You okay? Sasuke? Hinata-chan? They both nodded. Oh, Kakashi said, I see. But, the alarm sounded, dropping the smiles from the genins' faces. Kakashi grinned at them. Your time is up. All 3 of his students sighed. The 3 genin were tied to the stumps, Naruto in the middle with Hinata and Sasuke to his right and left respectively. Kakashi stood in front of them, bent down to their level. You know, none of you got a bell, but you all understood the meaning of this exercise. Somehow, when I read the names of the 3 genin assigned to be my students, I knew you guys would pass. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata's heads rose. You mean? Kakashi smiled at them. Yup. Team 7 starts missions tomorrow. And this is not a sequel to ASCTR. This doesn't have anything to do with ASCTR. Taiyushin Itu Tansen, Sun God's single strike edge. Naruto's first original jutsu, during his second chance, anyway. A sort of mimicry of Kakashi's. Reikari. Consumes an ungodly amount of chakra. It turns the chakra concentrated to one's fist into hot flames. The user remains unharmed, but anything else that touches it will feel as if they had been stricken by the sun, thus its name. It is also very much advised that you have the Sharingan as well. If you miss and can't keep Taiyushin Itu Tansen active, you're a goner. Updates will be slow for all my stories, due primarily to the new school year. Steadfast, my friends, and good luck. James Daniel Fox. James Daniel Fox, signature best viewed in Wendy Medium. Font style. The Legendary Sword. Masamune A Simple Change, The Sharingan by James Fox. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto or Rurouni Kenshin. Chapter 1, The Legendary Sword. Masamune. Naruto sat down at Ichiraku's ramen stand, alone for the first time that day. It had been a tiring day, one filled with boring D-rank missions and basic training. If Naruto didn't know any better, he'd say fate was conspiring to make his life hell. He glanced to his right, catching sight of a strange-looking person. Sitting in the seat next to him was a young man, probably in his late teens, with long red hair, resplendent in a rich, sapphire kimono. It was open slightly in the front, showing off a small portion of his torso. The bottom of his ribs and the whole of his stomach were covered in sarashi, the white warrior's bandage. His hands and forearms were protected by samurai bracers, cloth bindings that were attached to the back of the hand by a thong looped around the middle finger. The man's violet eyes were sharp and cold, much like Sasuke's had been. A single, diagonal scar traveled down his left cheek, starting just in front of his ear, and ending near the bottom of his chin, beneath his lips. His mouth was a horizontal line, betraying none of the emotions flitting through his mind. He was a wall of solitude. Long red bangs touched his furrowed brow and jaw, the rest, which would have traveled a great distance down his back, tied into a high ponytail, as was common among some samurai. An average white obi tied the bottom of his kimono closed, wrapped around twice to make sure it stayed on. A katana and wakizashi were strung to his hip, sheathed in plain black scabbards. Naruto thought that such objects would be uncomfortable and cumbersome when sitting, but the man seemed to have no trouble at all. He looked perfectly content how he was. Naruto's gaze drifted to the man's pants, which were actually gray hakama, the pants of the samurai, most common with Rurouni and Ronin. In the man's right hand were chopsticks, held in his dexterous fingers. The man's left hand held onto the edge of his ramen bowl as he calmly and slowly sipped the noodles, a glass of sake sitting not too far away. Naruto turned his head back around as his own ramen was laid out in front of him, steaming and fresh off the stove. "So you're the one who's been following me?" The man paused, gulping down the ramen in his mouth before he talked. He certainly had table manners. "Yes. Yes, I have, Naruto." Naruto broke his chopsticks. The man sounded just as he imagined he would. "Why?" The man paused again, considering his words as he continued to eat. "I've heard rumors of a cunning prankster who's managed to outwit several elite ninja. Normally, that would be reason enough for me to investigate." Naruto snorted. "So? But there was more to the rumor," the MN said, his voice as even and calm as ever. "I heard that a 6-year-old boy was the one pulling them off." "Again," Naruto said, arching an eyebrow. "Your point?" "Someone like that deserves my attention," the man said, ignoring Naruto's sarcasm. "I've never taken on an apprentice, but Jinchuriki would make a most interesting student." "Who told you?" Naruto growled, nearly destroying his chopsticks. "I know things that many others do not," the man said mysteriously, "and I let my ears open to all things I hear on the street." Naruto slurped his ramen, cautious of the man. "So, what are you going to do?" The man stood, slapping some money down on the table. "I'm going to teach you. Meet me at training area 12 tomorrow after your team's mission. Come alone." As the man began to walk away, Naruto shouted, "Wait, what's your name?" The man paused, looking at Naruto over his left shoulder. "Himura Batose." Naruto could only stare as the odd man known as Himura disappeared into the night. His second chance was definitely strange. The next day, after an infuriating adventure finding Tora, Madame Shijimi's cat, 2 times in a row, Naruto walked into the clearing, his hands clenched tightly. He had to admit, he was a bit nervous about what this man, Himura Batose, was going to do. He was in uncharted territory. Himura's expression hadn't seemed to change. His dark eyes were still cold and his mouth was still nothing more than a straight line. His hair remained the same. He turned as Naruto arrived, a katana grasped by the sheath in his right hand. He held it out as Naruto came closer. "This is Masamune. You shall come to cherish it as you do your own life. You'll treat it as if it were your immortal soul." Naruto took it from Himura's outstretched hand, running his fingers over the intricate dragon designs carved into the polished wood. He had been surprised by its weight at first, but it wasn't anything he couldn't handle. His weights were at an insane level. At least to him. Lee probably wouldn't think so, and Masamune really couldn't compete. At first, he was at a loss as to where to attach it to his person, since he figured it would take years to get used to having it hang from his shoulder or slung horizontally on his lower back. Since those were out, he decided to attach it to his unnoticeable belt, sitting comfortably on his left hip. When he was satisfied with its position, he turned his attention back to Himura, who stood patiently. "What next?" "Next," Himura said, pulling his own sword from its sheath and grasping it with his right hand. "I'll be showing you the basics of hidden Mitsurugi Ryu." Naruto felt dread slide down his spine like icy water, pooling in his stomach. He had a bad feeling that he was going to go home more beaten than his escapade at the Valley of the End. In the end, his training was most enlightening, and he truly did enjoy it, but he had been so sore that it wasn't even funny. "Well, okay." Himura had chuckled shortly when Naruto had complained of aches and pains. But to Naruto, it hadn't been funny at all. Naruto knew that his new training would pay off, probably pretty well against Zabuza, too. But that didn't mean he had to like the burning sensation in his muscles, or the sweat pouring off him in rivers. All in all, Naruto felt that things had been most productive, if quite painful. In the 4 weeks since he had met Himura Batose, Naruto felt he had an ironclad grasp of the basics of hidden Mitsurugi Ryu. They had hit some bumps and other obstacles here and there. It wasn't an easy thing to learn, but Naruto was quickly picking up skill with the sword called Masamune. After weeks and weeks of chasing the same cat, sometimes more than once a day, Naruto and Sasuke finally decided on something. They were tired of the same old boring mission. The aged Hokage's gaze traveled down the list of missions in front of him. "Let's see, Team 7, your next mission is..." "No." Sasuke and Naruto shouted in unison. "We're tired of these easy, menial tasks. We want a C-rank mission." Naruto turned around. "Isn't that right, Hinata-chan?" Hinata blushed, her head bobbing up and down. "Very well, Naruto-kun. Sasuke-kun, Hinata-chan." The third chuckled. "Your task is the protection of a certain individual." The old man motioned to his Chunin helper, who escorted an old drunk in from the room next door. The drunk looked at the genin, then took a swig from his sake bottle. "They look like a bunch of super brats. Especially that one," he said, pointing to Naruto. "He looks like he couldn't even lift that sword out of its sheath." He pointedly ignored the eyes trying to bore a hole into his skull, all 6 of them, taking another swig of his sake. "I'm the super bridge builder, Tazuna, and I expect you guys to give me super protection until I complete my bridge." As Team 7 left the safety of Konoha's gates, Sasuke and Hinata asked questions about Wave Country. Nami no Kuni. Naruto, who already knew the answers, ignored Kakashi and Tazuna as they gave the other 2 genin the information they sought. Naruto tensed for a second as they passed a puddle in the road. He knew what to expect, and this time, he would be ready. Last time, he may have frozen and got injured, but he had knowledge and experience on his side this time. He wouldn't be felled so easily as before. He wasn't disappointed. As soon as Kakashi's back was turned to the puddle, 2 figures rose from it. Odd masks strapped to their faces. Their chain was soon wrapped around the gray-haired Junin and pulled taut, shredding him to pieces. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto saw Hinata shiver when they laughed. "Heh heh, 1 down." They quickly dashed towards Naruto, who was grasping the hilt of his sword, prepared to strike him. "2 down, heh heh." A shuriken thrown by Sasuke forced one of them to slow for a second, allowing Naruto to unsheathe the Masamune. A quick, almost imperceptible slash shattered the chain between the 2 ninja, giving Naruto another direction in which to dodge. Naruto's moves were smooth and fluid, as he had been taught by his Kenjutsu, swordsmanship, teacher. Even in the heat of battle, his dodge to the left was graceful. A second flash of steel severed the respirator and the mist headband from the enemy closest to himself, and Naruto marveled at the strength of his blade. He had not only cut through cloth and plastic, but he had sliced through an iron chain like it was butter. Using his enemy's surprise to his advantage, Naruto quickly dismantled the claw on Gozu's hand with a third slash of his sword. Then, using butt end of his hilt, he knocked Gozu across the head, rendering him unconscious. Mizu, the second enemy ninja, made a dash towards Hinata after he dodged Sasuke's shuriken. He was so intent, so focused on what he saw in front of him, that he was unprepared for the harsh kick to the head that knocked him stumbling in Hinata's direction. Hinata, who had been able to anticipate Sasuke's attack, drove her open palm into Mizu's stomach. With a surprised gasp and a painful grunt, Mizu collapsed onto the girl's shoulder, his body limp and harmless. He was unconscious. Hinata tried to push his lifeless body off her without flat-out dropping him, a disgusted frown on her face, her Byakugan inactive. She found it difficult, his flowing dirty clothes tangling up with her taut, lean limbs and attempting to pull her down with him. Naruto and Sasuke couldn't help but laugh when she fell backwards, Mizu falling on top of her. It was quite comical, and even Tazuna couldn't help but chuckle. To see sweet little Hinata trying to untangle herself from an enemy she had felled mere minutes before wasn't something you saw every day. To see Hinata so frustrated was truly a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Finally, though, Kakashi, who had reappeared shortly after the battle had ended, took pity on the poor girl and pulled Mizu from atop her, laughing quietly. Naruto remembered the first time he had participated in the wave mission. He had been wounded and, upon that wound, he swore he wouldn't run away ever again. He may have been preoccupied by it, but he still heard what Kakashi and Tazuna had talked about. It surprised him, this time, because the conversation, or interrogation, was identical even with all the changes he had made. As far as Naruto could tell, Kakashi hadn't noticed his eavesdropping, and if he did, he made no mention of it. But as the elite ninja walked over, a distinctly tired look gleamed in his eye. Despite the skill that Team 7 possessed, Kakashi still didn't believe that they were ready for such a hard mission. He's wrong, Naruto thought bitterly. He had been training since day one for the eventual battle between himself and the upper-level ninja he would be up against. Zabuza and Haku wouldn't be the greatest challenge, but they would be strong. Gaara would be very difficult, but he still wouldn't match up with Naruto, especially taking into account the Kyuubi. Orochimaru would be the biggest challenge. Naruto might be able to get in a serious wound, because Orochimaru wouldn't be expecting so much skill out of the dead last of Konoha Ninja Academy, but the worst of the legendary three would most definitely trounce Naruto, despite any help the Kyuubi might give. Naruto, as he was sad to admit, wouldn't be able to pull out the Rasengan until the Chunin exam finals. Then, he would have an alibi. Its name. Jiraiya. Sure, it would be hard to explain to the perverted sage just how he knew the Rasengan step by step, but Naruto was very good at lying. Kakashi's voice snapped Naruto from his musings. Well, team, we have a choice. This mission is definitely B rank, bordering on A rank at the moment. We have the right to drop the mission and go back to Konoha right now if we want. On the other hand, we could continue the mission, but it'd be hazardous to our health. So which is it? Sasuke arched an eyebrow. Are you crazy, Kakashi-sensei? After we've come this far? I'll never back down, Hinata said, glancing at Naruto for support. That's my nindo. Kakashi's eyes swept over to the blonde ninja, who said, do you really have to ask? All right, Kakashi sighed, we're continuing the mission. Kakashi pinched the bridge of his nose as he turned around, tuning out the celebratory shouts and cries. Even though I have a really bad feeling about this. Thanks for everything, Tazuna whispered as he and Team 7 left the boat. He'd laid off the sake since the encounter with the Chunin duo. The ferryman shook his head. Don't mention it, Tazuna-san. As they headed down the road to Tazuna's place of residence, they caught sight of the bridge. Sasuke let out a low whistle. So that's the bridge? Wow. It's amazing, Hinata said, her eyes wide. Naruto grinned inwardly. He already knew about the bridge and its size. He'd fought on it after all. And how could he forget such an important part of his ninja career? It was where he fought his first major battle, and it was the first time he came close to facing a decisive loss. A thick fog rolled in as the group followed the dirt path to the little town in Wave Country, hiding the trees and bushes in a translucent haze. The wind was calm, and the only sounds heard were the soft clap-clap of the group's feet on the ground. Sasuke was the one to toss the kunai this time, and Hinata had promptly whacked him on the head for nearly killing a poor, harmless little bunny. Naruto had to stifle a laugh. Hinata was usually quiet and withdrawn whenever Naruto was near, and tried to be the best she could be. It was a change in pace to see her upset about something that seemed so trivial. The entire group suddenly ducked, Kakashi pulling Tazuna down with him, and the other three dropping to the ground on their own. A large Zanbatu, nicknamed Kabikari Hucho, neck-cleaving kitchen knife, flew over their heads, embedding in a tree. As Tazuna and his entourage rose, a figure could be seen standing on the huge sword's hilt, his back to them. Momochi Zabuza, Kakashi hissed, hand flying to his headband. Junin of the Bloody Mist. Heh, you appear to be Sharingan Kakashi, Zabuza said, chuckling evilly. Sorry, but the old man is mine. You'll have to get through me first, Kakashi growled, yanking his Hite-8 skyward, revealing the coveted Sharingan eye. The Sharingan so soon? Zabuza cackled maliciously. It is an honor. Zabuza and his sword disappeared and the fog began to thicken. Kakashi backed his group into a circle around Tazuna. Surround and protect the bridge builder, he's way out of your league. Time to even the odds, Naruto muttered, slipping his weights into his backpack and dropping it. He was careful to set it down lightly, no need to draw attention to himself. His right hand held the hilt of Masamune, his left grasping the top of the sheath. His knees were bent, and his eyes blazing with the Sharingan. He was ready for the Su-Ryu Sen, the twin dragon strike. To his left, Sasuke stood, his eyes alight with the Sharingan as well. He held a kunai in front of his torso, grasping it with both hands. His gaze darted around. No doubt, he was having just as much trouble seeing through the mist as Naruto and Kakashi. Damn it, he whispered hotly. Where is he? There was a sudden flash of sound from behind them, and Naruto had a good idea what it was. Hinata gasped, her Byakugan picking up on something they couldn't quite see. Naruto-kun. Sasuke-san. She was interrupted by a voice from directly behind them, near Tazuna. Heh. Right here, Naruto spun on his right heel, chanting to himself, hidden Mitsurugi Ryu. With a flare of speed, Masamune flew from its sheath, aimed to slice Zabuza's head from his neck. Kabikiri Hucho was brought to bear, blocking the potentially lethal blow. Zabuza was smug. Heh, nice try, kid. Zabuza's eyes widened as Masamune's sheath came at him, colliding solidly with his arm, just beneath his right shoulder. He sucked in a breath of air, surprise written across his face. Gahawa, Su-Ryu Sen. Grasping his shoulder with his left hand, Zabuza dropped his Zanbatsu, lashing out with a kick to Naruto's midsection. Naruto, who had expected Zabuza to burst into water, soared backwards, landing on his rear end a few yards away. Sasuke, who had attempted to tackle the missing ninja, and Hinata, who had tried to incapacitate him with a Juken strike, were both tossed aside like rag dolls. They were no match for the demon of the bloody mist. Naruto's head shot up when he heard Zabuza gasp again. Naruto's eyes widened. Kakashi stood behind Zabuza, a kunai stuck in the tan man's lower back. Water slowly flowed over the black metal, dripping to the hard ground. Suddenly, Zabuza exploded into water, splashing Kakashi's front. A second Zabuza materialized behind the leaf ninja, his sword prepared to swing around and cleave Kakashi in two. Kakashi-sensei. The three genin yelled. Sparash. Zabuza's sword cut Kakashi in half. Blood, bone, and flesh soon disappeared, replaced with a familiar clear-ish liquid. The Kakashi clone had reverted to water. Cold steel pressed against Zabuza's jugular. Another Kakashi stood behind him, Sharingan whirling. It's over. Silence reigned for a few seconds, then Zabuza started laughing. It's over? Ha! You're right, Kakashi, it's over. Sparash. Zabuza melted into a puddle, nothing more than liquid. Kakashi's eyes widened. A third Zabuza advanced upon Kakashi from behind, poised to swing his large blade. Kakashi ducked. But Zabuza seemed prepared for that. Using the momentum of his swing, he dug his sword into the ground, landing a roundhouse kick to Kakashi's jaw. The silver-haired Junin flew into the lake, soaked to the marrow. Zabuza was soon standing above him, making hand seals, Suiru no Jutsu. A sphere of water rose up, surrounding Kakashi and trapping him in Zabuza's grasp. Using his free hand, Zabuza made a seal, now to take care of those brats. Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. From the puddles of its predecessors, a water clone rose, no different than the real thing. It smirked at the genin, chuckling, you little punks don't know what it means to be shinobi. T was cut off as a black and gray blur came charging towards it. Clang. Karushiing. Masamune and Kabikiri Hucho clashed, sparks flying from their surfaces. Kurong. Neither Naruto nor Zabuza's clone seemed to be able to get in a solid hit, too evenly matched. Swoosh. The clone's sword cut through air, uninhibited by flesh or steel. Naruto had disappeared. Hidden Mitsurugi Ryu. Everyone looked up to see Naruto descend upon the clone, his sword's handguard parallel to the ground. The clone could do nothing to prevent the sharpened metal from sinking through his skull. Ryu Sui Senzan. With a jerk, Naruto pulled his sword free and jumped back, watching as the clone dispersed into water again. Even the real Zabuza would have been hard-pressed to dodge such a surprising attack. Naruto's blazing red eyes turned to the tan shinobi standing in the middle of the lake. In a flash, Naruto was gone again, dashing towards the captor of his sensei. His moist sword glistened in the small amount of light visible through the mist. As the blonde came upon him, Zabuza jumped a slight bit backward to give himself some room. In a flash of gray, Zabuza's Zanbatsu was pulled from his back, swinging down to meet Naruto's Masamune. Clang! Shara Ashing! The two swordsmen clashed, attempting to push one another back. Naruto was putting up a good fight, but Zabuza, with his superior skill and bigger, heavier sword, was gaining an advantage. Sheeing! Naruto pulled his sword from the introverted tug-of-war, dashing out of the path of Kabikari Hucho. Naruto was breathing heavily, but Zabuza seemed only slightly strained. Using his Sharingan to predict Zabuza's next move, Naruto bent backwards under the thick gray blade. Taking his chance, Naruto stabbed at the opening in Zabuza's guard, landing a painful, but shallow cut on the missing nin's left thigh. Zabuza cried out, back-fisting Naruto across the cheek. He flew sideways, landing headfirst against a tree at the shore. He was definitely unconscious. Zabuza's sword rose again, and he dashed towards Naruto's unmoving body. He snarled, "You little brat." Wham! A roundhouse kick landed in his jaw, knocking him backward into a nearby tree. Kakashi stood, a glare fixed on his face. "Don't forget. I'm your opponent." Brat, without even looking straight at the beast, Naruto could tell that Kyuubi was upset. "You're not going to lose to that weakling, are you? Even with all the training you did?" "He's a Junin." Even as the words left his lips, Naruto knew he was just making excuses. "He's a lot stronger than me." Kyuubi snorted, "That's bull." Naruto sighed, "So what do you want me to do? Kakashi-sensei can handle it." "There are so many things I could say to that," the beast grinned. Its eyes gleamed maliciously. "But I'll make it simple. Kick his ass." Naruto reeled back. He hadn't been expecting that. Kyuubi was usually somewhat calm and regal. He'd never heard it speak such vulgarities. "I can't," he said. "I'm trying to keep most things in the same time flow. If I don't, my memories of the future will become useless and obsolete." Kyuubi blinked. "Future memories? What are you talking about?" Naruto gaped at him, his eyes wide. "What? You mean you don't know? I thought you would. You're the one who sent me back in the first place?" "Oh really?" it asked, snarling. "And why would I send you back in time? What purpose would it serve me?" "We were dying, fool," Naruto hissed. "I made a stupid mistake that cost me my life. I trusted someone to follow the same moral rules I did, and guess what? It cost us our mortality." "Then what happened to me?" it roared, obviously furious that the boy had survived and he, apparently, had not. "I shattered the seal." Naruto yelled back. It was time to vent all his frustrations. "You promised to activate my bloodline and send me back as soon as the seal was broken. Why? Because, either way, you were going to die. The only way to stop it was to prevent it. And how did you do that? You sent me back in time so that I could stop that day from happening. But if certain events change too drastically, then I'll be stuck without any knowledge of what is to come. Then I'll send you back again. I don't care how many times you travel through time, you will not lose to a second-rate fighter," it shouted back. "I don't care. Just get out there and fight." "No," Naruto said, glaring furiously at the caged beast. The beast glowered at him. "Then I'll force you." Red chakra flooded from beneath the barred gates, engulfing Naruto wholly. "Ga! Sweeten!" Zabuza and Kakashi said together. "Suiryu!" The masses of water that had begun to form loose, draconian shapes suddenly splashed back down into the lake, destroyed by a lack of concentration. No one paid any notice, though. No, everyone's focus was on the figure by the lake edge, who was surrounded in an angry red chakra aura. The aura shifted and twisted, morphing into a humanoid, fox shape. Two tails protruded from the cloud of energy, swaying as though they were real appendages. RRRRRHH. The chakra surrounding Naruto's fists suddenly contorted, changing form and nature. His right hand was engulfed in red flames that licked his skin but caused no damage to Naruto at all. Hinata immediately turned off her Byakugan, the intensity of the attack too much for her sensitive eyes. Ba-chi-chi-chi-chi-chi. Kakashi gasped as the chakra around Naruto's left hand shifted into the form of red electricity, a mimicry of his own Reikiri. But this one, from what Kakashi could discern, was much more powerful and dangerous, and louder, too. Naruto, even if only instinctively, knew he could not show anything that would make him seem suspicious. The Chidori and his own jutsu could be explained as things he picked up with the Sharingan. But things like the Rasengan were too impossible for him to have learned with the circumstances surrounding him and his development. Greyaiwa, one of the translucent tails, grasped the hilt of Masamune, tugging it from the tree. With a fluid move, it flung the moisture still clinging to the blade into the air. Then, with flourish, it moved the Masamune back into its sheath. With speed Kakashi could barely track, Naruto was in front of Zabuza, eyes whirling with the Sharingan. Before the Mist Ninja had a chance to fight back, Naruto's closed right fist came crashing into his bare chest, scorching it. Flames exploded over Zabuza's torso, leaving painful burns over his chest and stomach. He stumbled backwards, clawing at his charred skin. Gah! Guruak! Red electricity soon replaced the fire, leaving Naruto with two supercharged hands. With that amazing speed he had demonstrated seconds ago, he was on top of Zabuza again, making clawed swipes at the tan shinobi, fingers alight with lightning. A wide but shallow gash drew itself along Zabuza's stomach, adding another injury for him to worry about. Zabuza was in too much pain to fully concentrate on dodging the dangerous attacks being thrown at him, giving Naruto a lethal advantage over him. Kakashi, Hinata, Sasuke, and Tazuna could only stare in amazement as the same boy who had trouble keeping up with the wayward shinobi a few minutes ago was delivering a crushing defeat to the Demon of the Mist, a Junin enemy who even Kakashi had a bit of trouble with. A sloppy dodge of Zabuza's left him open to another of Naruto's attacks. A powerful kick landed upon his burned chest, sending him flying into a tree. Gahu! In no less than a second, Naruto was upon the motionless man, electrically charged palm reared back, prepared for the final blow. But before he could do such a thing, his head spun around, and he jumped out of the way as two senbon flew towards his helpless victim. With two dull thuds, the needles embedded themselves in Zabuza's neck, instantly killing him. The electricity gone from his hands, Naruto returned to the corpse, sniffing it to confirm his death. With a growl, Naruto moved away, satisfied that his enemy was no longer among the living. Naruto's ears seemed to twitch as Highhead whipped around again, this time followed by his body. His whirling gaze latched onto the hunter nin who had thrown the senbon, wary of this new arrival. Naruto dropped into a defensive stance as the ninja jumped from his position on tree limb, slowly approaching the dead body of Momochi Zabuza. Naruto growled a warning growl, determined to keep this foreign person from touching his prey. The hunter nin backed up a bit, nervous to be around such an intimidating figure. The growling and demonic chakra were very strong deterrents, coupled with the red Sharingan, long fangs, and thick whiskers, and you had a very scary person. A person that most anyone would want to stay away from. Naruto was unprepared for the quick chop to the back of his neck, which rendered him unconscious faster than Tazuna could track. The blonde fell forward, caught on the stomach by Kakashi, who had delivered the incapacitating strike. The hunter nin cleared his throat nervously, his voice shaky. Thank you. I've been looking for the opportunity to kill Zabuza-san for quite a while now. He picked up the Mist Ninja's body, hefting it onto his shoulders. He still seemed shaken. I must dispose of this body now. Goodbye. With a hand seal and a whirlwind, the two of them disappeared, leaving Team 7 and Tazuna standing there, bewildered. Kakashi sighed, pulling his Hite back down over his Sharingan. It had been a very tiring day for him. As soon as the events had set into their minds, Hinata rushed over to Naruto, checking him for serious injuries and anything abnormal. Sasuke was busy coming to terms with all that had taken place in front of his eyes. The Hyuga heiress let out a relieved sigh when she could find nothing wrong, other than him being unconscious, and draped his left arm over her shoulders, intent on carrying her most precious person for however long she had to. Hinata wrapped her right arm around his back to support his weight, allowing her more mobility as well. In her own eyes, she was finally being useful to her crush. Sasuke tried to remind himself that he was still alive by taking deep breaths. He was rattled by what he had witnessed, and, frankly, this new side of Naruto was frightening. He had trouble believing that his best friend could wield so much raw power, and was scared that it would corrupt the blonde. He resolved to ask Naruto what had happened when he felt the time was right. Until then, things would go back to normal for him. Tazuna was odd. There were few better ways to describe exactly how he felt. When he had first set eyes on the small, spiky-haired boy, he had thought this Naruto kid was a pushover. He had feared that the boy would be the weakest link in the Team 7 chain. But after seeing the boy mop the floor with an elite, he knew he was in good hands. So, his heart lighter, he set the pace for the trek to his home. Kakashi could only lament on the events of the day as Tazuna led them to his home. He had picked apart every detail about the fight and had come to the conclusion that the Kyuubi had not been in control of his student. Naruto's movements had been wild and instinctual, his body acting on reflex and impulse alone. The Kyuubi would have done much more damage, and the Kyuubi would certainly have torn Zabuza's corpse to shreds in its bloodlust. Naruto had done no such thing, having backed off as soon as Zabuza was confirmed to be dead. That was another thing on Kakashi's mind. He knew that Zabuza had survived. He didn't do anything because he didn't have enough energy left to tackle a hunter nin who was half his age and probably twice as strong. Had he had enough information to assume that the hunter nin was Zabuza's accomplice, he would have let Naruto handle the problem. But, until the ninja had left with Zabuza's body intact, Kakashi didn't have enough data to declare the young boy an enemy. Thus, Zabuza and the boy had escaped and fled to fight another day. Kakashi shook his head. This was why he had quit the Anbu Black Ops. He had wanted to get away from the tangled web of lies and foul play that had plagued his missions. He had wanted to get away from the two-pronged deceit and the vicious half-truths that could cripple entire nations at a time. It was too tiring and pointless. It seems that bad feeling of mine was not unfounded. I hate it when I'm right. This is not a sequel to ASCTR. This doesn't have anything to do with ASCTR. Taiyushin Itu Tansen, Sun God's Single Strike Edge. Naruto's first original jutsu, during his second chance, anyway. A sort of mimicry of Kakashi's Reikari. Consumes an ungodly amount of chakra. It turns the chakra concentrated to one's fist into hot flames. The user remains unharmed, but anything else that touches it will feel as if they had been stricken by the sun, thus its name. It is also very much advised that you have the Sharingan as well. If you miss and can't keep Taiyushin Itu Tansen active, you're a goner. Sesha, I'm going to steal this little tidbit from Rurouni Kenshin. It means, this unworthy one. Naruto will use it during the beginning of his relationship with Hinata. Since Naruto is the bane of Konoha, he will feel he isn't worthy of Hinata's affection. I have heard many arguments against the Naruto-Hinata pairing. I'll address the biggest one right now. Listen up, non-believers, because your reasons for hating Hina aren't worth jack. The biggest argument about a romantic relationship between Naruto and Hinata is that they're 12, and that their crushes are just that, infatuations that won't last. Another part of this argument is that they're too young to really fall in love, and that them being married would eventually end in divorce or annulment. The people who present these arguments would have very valid points if they were talking about normal teenagers. But guess what, non-believers? You're not, and neither am I. Naruto and Hinata's professions involve danger unlike any we'd see in the modern day and age. These 12-year-olds are fighting life and death battles nearly every day. They recover from injuries that would probably cripple a real person for life. They're forced to mature earlier than the rest of the world, an adult in a child's body. One day, they could be fighting together, kicking butt. The next, they could be buried side by side in a cemetery, their names carved on the memorial stone. Relationships might not always work out, but it's more of a 50-50 chance than anything. And, when you look at it objectively, aren't all new relationships a shot in the dark? So tell me, non-believers, is it so impossible for these child soldiers to have a serious relationship? Take a look at their life expectancy, then think long and hard before telling me. Updates will be slow for all my stories, due primarily to the new school year. Steadfast, my friends, and good luck. James Daniel Fox. James Daniel Fox, signature best viewed in Wendy Medium. Font style. Himura's Visit and Zabuza's Return. A Simple Change. The Sharingan by James Fox. Disclaimer. I don't own Naruto or Rurouni Kenshin. Chapter 1. Baka Deshi, Himura's Visit and Zabuza's Return. Heishi sighed as he watched the setting sun from his personal garden. It had been another trying day, and he was glad that he finally had some measure of peace. Being the head of such a prestigious clan wasn't as easy as it looked to be. Hanabi was progressing greatly in the art of Juken, and it seemed likely she would surpass her sister quickly. Normally, that would mean that Hinata would be sentenced to the branch family, but, because of Hiashi's little arranged marriage for Hinata and Naruto, for the elders to do so would breach a very important Hyuga law. And the Hokage's trust. Heishi had to smirk at that. He had one-upped the stingy old people on the Elder Council. The elders were very angry with Heishi for betrothing his oldest daughter to the Kyuubi's vessel, but they couldn't do anything about it, since the documents were signed and locked away in the Sandame's office, with duplicate forms in Hiashi's private study. He chuckled as he remembered the obscene threats and curses the elders had thrown at him, only to have their words fall on Hiashi's deaf ears. Neji, though, Heishi felt a weight settle in on his heart, pulling at the strings wound so tightly. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't mend his relationship with his nephew. It was one of the reasons he tried to keep the branch family genius away from Hinata as much as possible, so that the boy didn't try to harm her in some sparring match or other. He knew that Neji placed most of the blame for his father's death on Hinata's shoulders, and the fact that Hinata was close friends with Naruto only increased his nephew's loathing for the girl. There was another thing on Hiashi's mind. Even though it had been roughly 7 years since his brother had died, he still missed him, and his heart ached for what had happened. The pain of his wife's death was greater, of course, and no one could really compare to losing the comfort of someone as close as a spouse, but his brother's death plagued him so much because he could have done something about it. Could have prevented his siblings' untimely demise. Leaves from the vine, falling to slow. Heishi smiled bitterly as the lyrics rolled off his tongue. Like little, tiny shells, drifting in the foam. It was something of a lullaby that his mother had sung to him and Hisashi when they were only boys. Now, with most of his precious people gone, this song held a strong sentimental value for him. Brave little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy, comes marching home. A lone tear fell slowly from his eye, rolling solemnly down his cheek. Seasons come and go, passing so slow, like little, tiny shells, drifting with the flow. Heishi felt water gather at the edge of his eyes, waiting for his barriers to crumble, so that they might fall freely. Little soldier boy, come marching home. Brave soldier boy, comes marching home. Heishi collapsed forwards, arms resting on his knees as he sobbed into his sleeves. So long, for so long he had retained a mask of apathy and sternness. Now, in this most private of places, shielded from even the Byakugan, he could drop it. Just for now. As consciousness swept over Naruto, a delicious smell wafted into his nostrils, his nose twitching reflexively. Even before his eyes opened, Naruto could feel his mouth salivating. A growl met his ears, and with a slight bit of embarrassment, Naruto realized it was his stomach. Slowly, his eyelids lifted, revealing twin sapphire orbs. His gaze traveled and, as Naruto had dreamed for the past few years, Hinata's porcelain skin and lavender eyes were the first things that he saw. A smile twitched across his lips. He felt truly loved. A smile lit up Hinata's face as she saw his eyelids flutter open, mirroring his own peaceful grin. She only wished that he was waking to her face under less stressful circumstances, but, as her luck would have it, such was not to be. They were in the middle of an A-ranked mission, which meant that things could have been much more peaceful. But, regardless of what was happening around them, and the circumstances that had placed them where they were, Hinata smiled down at him and said, "Good morning, Naruto-kun." Gently, Naruto rose, his head pounding. With the pads of his fingers, he massaged the sensitive temples on the sides of his skull. The blow he had taken from Zabuza was taking its toll on him. With a little help from Hinata, Naruto stood from his comfortable bed, clad in a pair of cotton pajamas that he had packed. Though awake, Naruto still felt very drained, so Hinata had to half carry him to the breakfast table. Despite this, there was no awkwardness, no embarrassment for either of them, well, except for the obvious feelings one experiences around his or her crush. Kakashi looked up as they walked in, his eye arching upwards. "Good morning, you two. Nice to see you're up, Naruto." Naruto nodded, one arm slung over Hinata's shoulders, the other holding the side of his head. "How long was I out for, sensei?" Kakashi shrugged, buttering his toast. "Only about a day. It's something of a miraculous recovery, seeing how hard you hit that tree." Naruto nodded again, sitting down in between Hinata and Sasuke. Sasuke tossed him a worried look, but he just shook his head and grinned. Not much could keep Naruto down, regardless of how hard he'd been hit. "Zabuza's still alive," Kakashi said. Somehow, he had managed to down 3 pieces of toast without anyone catching the slightest glimpse at what was beneath his mask. Naruto mumbled an acknowledgement, shoving a large amount of rice into his mouth. He'd figured as much, thanks to the unsatisfied growling coming from the farthest corner of his mind. There was very little else that the Kyuubi could be upset about. Anyway, Naruto looked up. Kakashi was wiping his masked mouth with a napkin. "Since all of you know the correct chakra exercises, as soon as you're better, Naruto, all 3 of you will start your own training." Despite his fast healing abilities, it was still a few days before Naruto was at his best again. With his chakra restored and the pounding in his head quieted, Kakashi had taken the 3 genin out into the woods, where they would begin their training. Now, Kakashi stood in the middle of the clearing, hands on his hips. "Let's." Kakashi was interrupted by a kunai that whizzed past his head and embedded in the tree next to Naruto. Kakashi's eye was wide, and the rest of the team had their mouths dropped open. None of them had noticed the kunai until it had flown past the gray-haired Junin. Naruto took the initiative and tugged it from the tree, pulling off the note attached to it. The note said, "Come to the next clearing alone. We need to continue your lessons." Himura Shisho. Naruto's eyes widened and he crumpled the note, letting his chakra set it on fire. No one else could read this, lest they find something they shouldn't. "I'm going to go train on my own, sensei," Naruto said, jumping into a tree at the edge of the clearing. "There are some things I need to practice." Without another word to anyone on his team, he left them, heading in the direction of where the kunai had come from. Why Himura had followed him on his mission was a mystery, but if his Shisho was calling, then it would be very near taboo to ignore the man. It took him nearly half an hour to reach his destination, despite running at his full speed, but he knew it would be worth it. Himura was a great teacher, and his lessons had paid off against Zabuza quite well. When he landed in the clearing, Himura's back was to him, a bag hung over his shoulder. As soon as Naruto touched the grass, though, his Shisho turned around, dropping the bag carelessly. Naruto would usually have had a bit of trouble understanding why, but, as soon as the bag hit the ground, he didn't need to ask. Why? Because it left a 1.5-foot deep crater. Naruto began to sweat a little as he realized that whatever was in the bag was probably for him. And if crater was any indication, Naruto gulped nervously, his mouth suddenly dry and his palms soaked. If the crater was any indication. Himura seemed to notice Naruto's discomfort, a smirk creeping onto his lips. "Don't worry, Bakadeshi. The weights in that bag are for you, but you won't be training with them on, at least, not for today." Naruto let out a relieved sigh, relaxing a bit. "Then what are we doing today, Shisho?" Himura closed his eyes, his hands clasped together behind his back. "Today, we will be furthering your ability in the hidden Mitsurugi style of Kenjutsu." But, Naruto sputtered. "You just said we wouldn't be training today." "And we're not," Himura interrupted, "but that doesn't mean you won't be learning." He picked up the bag and tossed it to Naruto, who fell under the unexpected weight. He smirked again as Naruto struggled to lift it. "Take off yours and put those on." Naruto obeyed, shrugging off his own weights and pulling out nearly identical bands. The weights Himura had given him were small black bands, no bigger than his forearm. Several different seals were stitched into the fabric, but the thread used to make them was so dark a gray that one would be hard-pressed to notice them. Upon closer inspection, Naruto found something folded into the inside. He pulled it out on each of the 2 forearm weights and realized that the bands were actually cloth samurai bracers, no different than the ones Himura wore. He shot a questioning glance at Himura, who nodded. Naruto apprehensively pulled off the strap-on sleeve and the bandages that covered his arms, slipping the bracers on and looping the small thongs over his middle fingers. They fit perfectly, not too tight, but snug enough that they wouldn't slide up and down as he moved. Himura went through some hand seals, and suddenly, Naruto's face faltered under the new weight. With no small amount of effort, he stood again, straining to keep his balance. Those weights are made heavy by a nin genjutsu hybrid, Himura explained, his expression unchanging. In order to release this jutsu, you need only use a certain 3-seal combination. Tatsu, Uma, Tora. To reapply the jutsu, you need only reverse the seal order, and the amount of weight will be determined by the amount of chakra you use. Now, put on the other set. With difficulty, Naruto picked up the second set, and almost fell down again as he realized that the second set weighed as much as the first set. Still, Naruto wasn't one to give up, and, after about 10 minutes, had managed to strap the other set of weights, which were simple bands, onto his shins. Panting, he looked back at his shisho. So, will these affect the ground I walk on and inanimate objects? Himura shook his head. As long as they remain on your body, they'll only affect yourself and other people. If you take them off and let them drop to the ground, then they'll affect your surroundings. Himura sat down on the grass, his legs crossed, Indian style. Next, meditation. Anyone within 500 yards of that clearing could hear a loud, "What?" Naruto walked sluggishly into Tazuna's house, his feet dragging and his arms drooping. All eyes turned to him, and he gave them a weak grin before he fell flat on his face, too tired to do more than groan. Hinata was at his side in an instant, trying to lift him from the floor. She found it quite difficult. The extra weight that clung to his arms and legs made him too heavy to carry, and, even with Sasuke helping her, she was very unsuccessful. With his students unable to pull Naruto from his bed on the wooden floor, Kakashi stepped forward, making a show of pretending to lift his sleeves. With a low grunt, he hefted Naruto into his arms, carrying him to bed. There was one night that Naruto would never forget, whether it was the original or this new version, which was influenced by his different experiences. He had been slightly surprised that he had been around for it, but some higher power seemed to want him to do certain things. And this particular night appeared to be one of those things. It was quiet that night. It was that kind of quiet that sneaks up on you before you realize it's there. It was that kind of quiet that makes just want to scream and pull your hair out. It was that kind of quiet that just presses down on you, trying to crush your skull and shatter your ribs. Sasuke was inhaling his food, desperately seeking energy for the next day's training. Despite his new lighthearted, carefree personality, he still sought revenge against his brother, Itachi. And to take his revenge, he would need strength and skill. The only way to achieve those was to train, so that's what he did. Kakashi was eating at a slower pace, unconcerned with replenishing lost energy. Several condiment bottles and other objects were set up around him, hiding his face from view. He needn't regain his strength, since the only one of his genin that could tire him out would be Naruto, the stamina freak. And Naruto trained by himself. Hinata ate at a subdued pace, shooting worried and admiring glances at the blonde sitting to her left. She was worried about him. She knew he wore weights all the time. She did too. Thought they were nowhere near as heavy. But Hinata knew that before they left Konoha, Naruto's weights weren't anywhere as heavy as they were when she tried to pick him up that first day after training. If something was wrong. Naruto's hand rose up shakily, bringing his chopsticks to his lips. His muscles were so sore. Every day, once he got used to the current weight resting on his limbs, Himura Shisho would increase it quite a bit. Naruto would admit that learning these new techniques was awesome, but the price he paid to learn them was pretty high. Naruto's gaze traveled around the table, and he noticed, for the first time ever, that most of the food they were eating could be bought on a child's allowance. His brow furrowed, his lips forming a thin line. Tazuna-san, are things really so bad? The bridge builder stared at Naruto, sorrow written on his features. Yeah. The old man sighed, for once looking his age, things weren't always so bad. Inari wasn't always so reclusive and cold. Everything was peaceful and pleasant. His fist clenched, then he came along and ruined it all. If he hadn't set his frigid sights on our little country, things would be great. But he had to ruin it all. He took our money. He took our freedom. He took Inari's father from us. The entire Tazuna family froze at his last words, each for their own reason. The old man himself froze because he just realized what he had said. Tsunami froze because she was concerned over Inari. Inari himself froze because the words of his grandfather had caused a pang of anguish and fury to cut through his heart. The dishes at the table clanged lightly as the young boy slammed his chopsticks down in front of him, his eyes invisible behind his hat. He stood abruptly, his head down and his arms tense at his sides. Without uttering a single word, he turned on his heel and ran from the room, leaving the rest of the people there to look at his retreating back. Kakashi, with his mask on, turned to Tazuna. "Tazuna-san, what happened?" Tazuna turned away, a grim, sad look on his face. "It's best you don't know. Suffice to say that Gato killed the courage and bravery of this village. And in the same day with the same person, Inari lost the most important thing in his life." Naruto laughed mirthlessly. "At least Inari had a father. Mine died before I could know him." Seeing his distress, Hinata reached out and squeezed his hand reassuringly. She blushed lightly when he smiled at her and squeezed back. Standing and bowing, Naruto said, "Excuse me, Tazuna-san, Tsunami-san, I've lost my appetite." Soundlessly, he left the room, Hinata following him a few short seconds later. Sighing, Tazuna went back to his food. "I wonder how long it is until they figure it out." Chuckling good-naturedly, Kakashi said, "It all depends. When will Naruto figure out that Hinata likes him and he likes her back? It might take a while." Day after day, for nearly 2 whole weeks, Naruto showed up looking in similar shape, sometimes with cuts and other times with bruises. Sometimes, he was in good enough shape to eat with everyone else, but, more often than not, he would show up at Tazuna's door tired and aching. Eventually, the day came when Naruto could not wake up with his team. Kakashi, with Tazuna, Hinata, and Sasuke in tow, left for the bridge, leaving Naruto behind with Tsunami and Inari. Barely 10 minutes later, as the group of 4 came upon the bridge, a gruesome sight met their eyes. Bodies littered the bridge, bleeding and broken. Machinery was bent and twisted unnaturally, hinting at something more than human being the cause. It was the site of a massacre. Splotches and puddles of blood followed the motionless corpses, staining the smooth concrete and dark wood red. Appendages were protruding at odd angles, obviously broken and smashed. Only a monster would be capable of such a thing. What the hell? A thick artificial mist rolled in, even as the words rolled off of Tazuna's tongue. Soon, most of the carnage was obscured. "Heh, heh, heh," a dark voice chuckled, echoing from within the fog. "Long time no see, Kakashi. I see you still have those brats with you, but it seems the blonde one ran away. That's too bad." 2 figures appeared from the depths of the mist, one tall and imposing, with a huge sword on his back. The other small and compact, a mask hiding his or her features from the world. "After all," Zabuza said, smirking behind his bandages, "I had a score to settle with him." Naruto awoke to the sound of a crash, jolting from his bed. His was on his feet in an instant, slipping his clothes on as quickly as possible. "Kya!" Tsunami's scream echoed throughout the halls, speeding up Naruto's dressing rate. "Mom!" Naruto heard Inari cry. With fervor and amazing agility, Naruto tore Masamune from its sheath and nearly busted the door off its hinges as he left the room. He seemed to fly down the stairs towards the source of trouble. When Naruto landed in the hallway, he could distinctly hear the 2 samurai conversing about how many hostages they needed. One of them, the freaky-looking one with the eye patch, grinned as his partner confirmed that they could kill the little boy. In the blink of an eye, Naruto was upon them, his sword carving into the freaky one's flesh. A diagonal wound opened up, starting at the freaky one's waraji right shoulder and ending at his left hip. It wasn't too deep, but it definitely hurt like hell. Zori advanced on Naruto from behind, but Naruto's keen senses and speed allowed him the first strike. He twisted around, bringing Masamune across Zori's stomach. That wound was deep, and most definitely fatal. With a solid kick to the injury, Naruto sent the second samurai flying out the kitchen window and into the yard. Waraji let out a battle cry as he swung his sword. However, like his companion, he was far too slow. Naruto spun around and leaned forward, catching the taller man's chest with his right shoulder. Masamune protruded from Waraji's back, slicing through the doomed man's stomach. With a sickening squelch, Naruto pulled his blade free and punched the man outside to join his comrade. Blood coated the silvery metal, staining it crimson. With but a twitch of his wrist, the blood flew from his sword, landing on the now messy wooden floor. Then, with a single, fluid motion, Masamune returned to its saya, its sheath. Naruto turned towards his two witnesses, his face stern. A second later, it disappeared, and a smile broke out onto his lips. Good job, Inari. You'll make a brave man someday. His job done, he headed for the door. He would dispose of the corpses first. It wouldn't do for Inari or anyone else to see the disemboweled samurai decorating the front lawn. Then, he would head over to the bridge, and maybe he'd be in time to save Haku and Zabuza. Naruto Nissan. Inari moved forward shakily. Where are you going? Naruto ruffled Inari's hair the way an older brother or father would. If you guys were attacked, then the bridge will be, too. My friends will need my help. Inari nodded. He understood. He could understand now why this boy was smiling all the time. He could understand why this blonde kid was so confident. And now that he understood, he was happy. Take care of your mom. With a grin, Naruto disappeared in a flash of black. A series of thuds echoed in Sasuke's ears as Senbon rained down on him. Even with his Sharingan, all he could do was dodge, and he found it very frustrating. He was an Uchiha, damn it, he shouldn't be having this much trouble. A sharp whistle fell onto his ears and he jumped out of the way again, managing to miss getting hit by the barrage from behind. Sasuke growled uncharacteristically, "Bastard, I don't want to kill you." The masked boy's toneless voice echoed hauntingly. "Just give up." "Damn you." Sasuke snarled angrily. "Go to hell. Do Ryu-sen," a familiar voice cried. A few of the mirrors shattered as debris from the bridge smashed into them. A grin lit up Sasuke's face as he caught sight of his savior, and he couldn't help the barb that slipped past his lips. "You're late." Naruto grinned back, the tip of Masamune's blade hovering an inch above a crater in the concrete. His eyes were simple azure, and his clothes were definitely in better shape than Sasuke's. Sasuke's eyes flashed back to his enemy, each crimson orb whirling with two comma patterns. Just because Naruto had arrived didn't mean the masked boy wouldn't capitalize on the distraction it provided. Naruto dove forward at the mirror prison reformed, landing next to Sasuke. Masamune found its sheath once again, nestled in the delicate wood. A wave of Senbon fell upon the duo, forcing them back. Even with their speed, a few had managed to make nicks and cuts, something that surprised Naruto especially. If he was correct, then Haku was even stronger than last time. Naruto dearly wished that he could activate his Sharingan, but he couldn't make it known to anyone but his teammates or else Orochimaru would seek him out too. This match was going to be close, he could tell. His eyes flicked over to Sasuke, who was making hand seals. Naruto flung his hand out to stop the boy. "Wait, Sasuke. That level of Kaden won't work on these mirrors." Taking his advice, Sasuke halted his seals, moving into another ready stance. Things were not looking too well for the Uchiha cousins, but everything would work out. Naruto just knew it. Haku took advantage of the distraction, plowing his shoulder into Naruto's stomach. Naruto, who had been lost in thought, was unprepared to block it. The wind was knocked from his body, and he went flying backwards, landing somewhere near the edge of the ice mirrors. "Sorry, Zabuza," Kakashi said, pulling his Hite-8 up, exposing his Sharingan, "but I have to end this now." The ex-Mist Nin chuckled. "Sharingan? Is that all you can do, monkey boy?" Zabuza chuckled darkly. A shinobi's supreme technique is not something that should be showed to the opponent over and over." Kakashi interrupted him. "You should feel honored. You're the only person to see it twice, and there definitely won't be a third time." Zabuza wasn't fazed. "Hey, even if you beat me, you'll never beat Haku. He's even stronger than I am." Kakashi snorted. "There's nothing as boring as a man's bragging. I've figured out the trivial system of that Ninpo. Kirigakure no Jutsu." Sasuke's eyes moved towards his cousin, worry in his gaze. Haku saw this, and took advantage of it. While Naruto was down, he dashed towards the boy, and, just as he planned, Sasuke rushed to intercept his attack. Naruto's eyes flew open as a loud crack rent the air. He looked around to find Haku on the ground, with Sasuke barely a few feet in front of the blonde, standing over him protectively. He was wheezing, and had quite a bit of trouble standing. Naruto caught Sasuke as he fell backwards, spent. My cousin," Sasuke's voice was hoarse and scratchy. "My best friend. My brother. Don't die, Naruto. Or I'll kill you." Naruto slowly set Sasuke down, careful not to add to the damage already in place. He knew Sasuke would be fine, he knew it wouldn't be fatal, just as he knew that he'd find some way to win this battle against this stronger Haku. Haku rushed towards the blonde, catching him off guard. This is the end. Naruto-kun. A sound met Naruto's ears. A sound Naruto never wanted to hear. A sound that tore Naruto apart. A sound that could send Naruto on a killing spree that even Gaara would be jealous of. A wet squelch sounded as Haku's weapon dragged itself across Hinata's neck, severing a very vital artery. Even as 1,000 possible ways to repair the damage crossed his mind, Naruto knew it would never work. For the first time in this second chance of his, Naruto felt his heart stop. In an instant, he was by her side, forgetting the opening in Haku's defense as the masked boy tried to stand again. To many, Naruto seemed to have used some sort of teleportation. 1 second, he was next to Sasuke, the next, he was by Hinata's side. Before she even hit the ground, Naruto had caught her, trying desperately to stem the bleeding. When he realized that he was unsuccessful, he let the tears come, burying his head in the crook of her neck, where the wound was. Shish, he heard her whisper in his ear. I have something to tell you, Naruto-kun. Anything, he mumbled into her clothes, his salty tears dripping into the wound and mixing with her blood. Aishiteru, Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes snapped open and his breath caught in his throat, her words reverberating in his ears. He felt joy and despair mingle in his system, but he was so caught up in the whirlwind of emotions that he didn't hear the hiss of her wound closing and disappearing. He stood as her breathing slowed, not wanting to have to bear hearing it stop. Rage and hatred soon filled his being, calling for Haku's blood in return for Hinata's. He couldn't find it in himself to care about setting the future right anymore. For him, there was no future without Hinata. His pulse drummed in his ears as his anger grew, threatening to consume his entire being. I can help you take revenge, a deep voice whispered seductively in his ear. Just do what I say. Against his better judgment, Naruto found himself making the hand seals the voice had told him to do. He couldn't bring himself to care about it anymore. The only thing that mattered was taking his revenge, and that's what he was going to do. Ninpo, his voice roared, penetrating even the thickness of the mist. Kachiyose no Gongen. There was silence for a few seconds, then the world disappeared around Naruto, leaving him standing in a black emptiness. The dark expanse seemed to stretch on forever, nothing but emptiness surrounding him. He didn't know where he was, but he sensed a power somewhere deep within this antimatter space. He wanted that power. He wanted his revenge, and this strange power would let him have it in the sweetest way possible. The entity of power seemed to hover, as if looking for him, and he suddenly understood what was needed. He pulled the chakra from his body, both his own and the Kyuubi's, and shoved it forward, creating a beacon for this entity to find him with. 3 red orbs suddenly appeared from the darkness, glowing as they stared at him. They were in a triangle formation, and seemed to see right into his soul. I have found you. A deep voice echoed, originating from the orbs. The world, which seemed to have stopped as soon as the words left Naruto's mouth, lurched into motion again as red and blue chakra shot upwards from Naruto's body, creating a giant pillar of light. Everyone shielded his or her eyes. Gua, a low growl fell across the bridge. Kakashi gasped as he gazed at the leviathan that towered over the wood and concrete. There was only one word to describe the thing that Naruto had summoned: amazing. It stood tall, 3 red orbs for eyes set in a triangular pattern that stared down at Haku. A thin, crescent moon-shaped object was attached to its forehead, the ends of it stopping above where a normal person's ears would be. Its head was round, bereft of everything but the object on its forehead and the 3 crimson orbs. Its shoulders were concealed by 2 pieces of skin or whatever it was that covered the beast. Beneath these pieces of skin were some solid objects, which were actually yellow horns that protruded from the beast's back. Its arms, though long and lanky compared to its body, were scrunched up, and, like most of its body, pitch black. Its fingers were pointed, like claws. Its legs weren't fully extended, and were probably incapable of doing so. Spikes protruded upwards from its knees, as if protecting the beast's thin torso. It had no feet, and its shins were scrunched much like the arms, ending in points. To top off its frightening look, a sort of cape made of red chakra fell down from its waist and covered the backs and sides of its legs. Garua. It threw its upper body back, as if stretching after a long nap. Even as heavy as it had to be, it still floated above the water of the river, ocean that ran beneath the bridge. Haku trembled as it leveled its red gaze at him, leering as best it could without a mouth, nose, eyebrows, or the ability to change its facial expression. Goo! Kakashi was frightened and surprised. This creature was clearly larger than Gamabunta. Hell, Kakashi was willing to wager it was bigger than the Kyuubi, and much more frightening as well. What had been most scary about the demon fox were its size, power, and killing intent. But this creature was topping the demon in all three. What the hell? Zabuza shouted. Tazuna fell backwards, onto his rear. This thing was scaring him beyond what he believed possible. His mind was screaming at him to run, but his body just wouldn't respond. It was like a train wreck. You wanted to look away, but you couldn't, for some reason. The beast seemed ignorant of everyone but Haku, and slowly lowered its hand, grabbing the boy. Haku struggled against its iron grip, but to no avail. His fate was in the hands of this beast, and things didn't look too great for him. He waited anxiously for the creature to tighten its grip and crush him. But it never came. Suddenly, Haku was plummeting for the bridge, his life spared thanks to the diverted attention. With a quick flip and a little chakra, Haku landed safely on the bridge, turning his eyes towards the beast's target. His eyes widened. Replacing him in the creature's hand was Gatu, his arm broken and his voice screaming desperately. The rogues who had been with Gatu were throwing spears and other weapons at it in an attempt to free their employer, but they were unsuccessful. Nothing pierced the beast's rock-hard hide. There was a sickening crunch, and Gatu's cries suddenly ceased, his body limp. Silence settled over the bridge, the reality of the event much too surreal for most. It was only interrupted as Gatu's body fell into the water with a resounding splash. With a blinding flash of light, the creature disappeared, leaving Naruto lying prone where he had first summoned the beast. His chakra was spent, and he was too exhausted to stay awake, let alone move. He fell into sleep hoping that he would rejoin his dead love, Hinata. Kakashi pulled his Hite down, glancing over to Zabuza, who looked somewhere between happy and disappointed. Disappointed, because he wouldn't be getting paid, and happy, because the slime ball known as Gatu was dead. Do you want to finish them? Kakashi asked, gesturing towards the remaining enemies. Or would you mind sharing? I've got some frustration to vent. You're too confident, Zabuza chuckled. You know just as well as I that we don't have the chakra to take all of them on. Hey, one of the rogues shouted. You killed our meal ticket, so now it's your fault we have to pillage the little town at the end of this bridge. Kakashi and Zabuza moved into battle stances as the group began to stalk forward, towards the tiny village in Wave Country. With their superior numbers, it looked like Gatu's thugs would manage to overcome the ninja and make good on their threat. An arrow suddenly landed a few feet in front of the lead rogue, and every conscious person turned their eyes towards the beginning of the bridge, where it had come from. There, clad in makeshift armor and carrying all sorts of kitchen and farm utensils, such as pitchforks and shovels, were the townspeople, glaring menacingly at Gatu's hired muscle. The rogues took one more look at the odds, then turned tail and ran back to the boats they had come in. Taking on a few ninja wouldn't be too hard. They'd lose a lot of good men, but they'd have won in the end. But when you add in the people of the town, there was no way that they'd make it out alive. When Naruto woke up, he was glad to find Hinata hovering over him, worried about his well-being. After all that had happened, he had thought her to be dead, and that had scared him more than any enemy ever could. He didn't want to think about life without Hinata. Neither Naruto nor Hinata mentioned the words spoken on the bridge. It wasn't for lack of trying, they just never had the privacy to do so. Tsunami and Inari were always checking up on them to make sure they were okay and that their injuries were healing properly. Naruto was relieved to find out that, not only were Haku and Zabuza alive, but they would be joining Konoha. They were going home with Team 7, and they were going to become Leaf Nin. They were tired of life on the run. 2 weeks later, it's all thanks to you that we've completed the bridge, Tazuna told Team 7, ruffling Inari's hair affectionately. Thank you for your hospitality, Tazuna-san. My team and I hope to see you at the Chunin exams. I'll make sure have an escort sent out for you, Kakashi said, smiling through his mask. With a single, backward glance, Team 7 and their new companions turned around and left Wave Country, heading home to Konoha. They had gained many new friends on this journey, and they would gain many more. As they headed down the road that would take them home, 2 members of the Team 7 entourage fell back, so that they could start their long-awaited talk. "Hinata-chan," Naruto said quietly, "did you really mean what you said?" Hinata blushed, poking her index fingers together. "Anyo, why yes." She blushed a darker red, one that Naruto was sure she had invented upon the spot. "I do love you, Naruto-kun. With all my heart." "Aishiteru, Hinata-chan." Naruto smiled, lacing his fingers with hers. "Sessha wa kanza shiteru dezu. Sorkare wa dezu." Naruto leant over and gave her a peck on the cheek, watching as she turned an even deeper shade of red. "This one is very thankful." Naruto's gaze drifted towards the sun and his smile widened. "That he is." Next time, things heat up as Naruto learns what it is he summoned. Oh, this just screams Kyuubi. What secrets is the demon fox hiding from the world? What was the creature that Naruto met, and why did it say, "I have found you"? That's definitely not normal for a summon. "Shut up. I'll kill you." Gaara makes his premiere appearance, too. And it seems Shukaku is uneasy about something. What could that insane raccoon be muttering about? Are his ramblings even credible, or is it just some wild goose chase? Wait, what? A written exam? Ah, shit. That's so boring, though. And what's with Enko? Will Naruto be able to avoid Orochimaru? Next time on A Simple Change, the Sharingan, the Terror of Death. This is not a sequel to ASCTR. This doesn't have anything to do with ASCTR. Ninpo. Kachiyose no Gongen, ninja art. Avatar's summoning. I'll explain this later, when another person displays this ability, like Gaara. Taiyushin Itu Tansen, Sun God's single strike edge. Naruto's first original jutsu, during his second chance, anyway. A sort of mimicry of Kakashi's. Reikari. Consumes an ungodly amount of chakra. It turns the chakra concentrated to one's fist into hot flames. The user remains unharmed, but anything else that touches it will feel as if they had been stricken by the sun, thus its name. It is also very much advised that you have the Sharingan as well. If you miss and can't keep Taiyushin Itu Tansen active, you're a goner. Sessha, I'm going to steal this little tidbit from Rurouni Kenshin. It means, this one. It's a very humble way to describe oneself. Naruto will use it during the beginning of his relationship with Hinata. Since Naruto is the bane of Konoha, he will feel he isn't worthy of Hinata's affection. Sessha wa kanza shiteru dezu. Sorkare wa dezu. This one is thankful. That he is. Aishiteru. I Love You. The song Heishi sings is from Avatar. The Last Airbender. I made an additional verse for it, but the original comes from Avatar, and thus, isn't mine. I make no claim towards the song at all, since it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the people at Nickelodeon, SP. Let's see if any of you can guess the name of the creature that Naruto summoned. If you can't figure it out, you'll have to wait till next chapter. Updates will be slow for all my stories, due primarily to the new school year. Steadfast, my friends, and good luck. James Daniel Fox. James Daniel Fox, signature best viewed in Wendy Medium. Font style. The Terror of Death, A Simple Change. The Sharingan by James D. Fox. Chapter 4. The Terror of Death. Naruto wandered through the dark halls of his dreamscape, intent on discovering just what he had summoned back at the bridge. That creature, summon, whatever it was, had been like a mindless puppet. He had been in control of its movements and everything, and he wanted to know what had happened. As such, there was only one being in the universe who could answer his questions, and that being was rude, foul-tempered, and hot-headed. That being also happened to be a demon fox that towered several stories over his head, making Shukaku seem like a baby duckling by comparison. Kyuubi. He called out as he stopped in front of the beast's cage. I want some answers. There was a growl as the beast's crimson eyes focused on him. Oh, and what information is it that you seek? You know why I'm here, Naruto seethed, glaring at the giant fox. His patience was wearing thin. I want to know what I summoned. Naruto could hear the fox shuffle around a bit, as if getting comfortable. Then, it spoke. I did some digging in your memories, and I came upon your fight with that crazy raccoon, Shukaku. Naruto suppressed a shiver. Despite being slightly disturbed by the fact that the beast had been searching through his memories, he pressed on. Yeah. And what could barely pass for a grin spread across the demon's maw. I saw that boy, Gaara, bring out the Shukaku's true form. That didn't seem fair to me, that he would have an avatar, a physical manifestation of Shukaku and his power, but you didn't. And since I myself couldn't become your avatar, because of the seal, I decided to create one for you. The beast's grin widened into a large smirk. Thus, Skeeth was born. Though he has a conscience, he is merely a manifestation of my power and your iron will. The perfect avatar, capable of thinking for itself, but completely at your control. It gives you advice and ideas for its own use in combat, and it has special abilities that would blow your mind, but what to do with the power is totally your decision. But, Naruto butted in, won't Skeeth's conscience war with mine? Since he has infinite energy, he would win eventually, right? The beast chuckled. The only time Skeeth takes over is when you are unable to think and fight coherently. Otherwise, he is completely at your beck and call. Naruto eyed the beast warily. I don't really trust this whole situation, but I don't suppose I have a choice. I'll call on Skeeth, but only if I need him. Remember, boy, the Kyuubi reminded him, you need only pull on my Yuki and call out his name to summon him. Without so much as a backward glance, Naruto disappeared. He was done with the beast for the moment, so he had no reason to stay. Stupid brat, the Kyuubi growled, tolerance wearing down. That's what I get for saving his vixen. A few days later, Naruto and Hinata walked down a narrow path, enclosed by a fence on either side. It was sunny, and the two of them were headed for a lunch date at Ichiraku's ramen stand. A smile stretched across their faces. It was a Kodak moment, the perfect scene. But even the perfect scene has interruptions. Naruto's nose twitched as he caught a familiar scent, one that he just recently started to associate with his littlest pain in the neck. With a barely perceptible jerk, he motioned at the rectangular box following them. Hinata seemed to understand. Winking at him, like they were sharing some secret, she giggled lightly. As they walked by a tree, Naruto reached out and plucked 2 apples from its branches. He had plans for these 2 objects. They were just the right size for what he was going to use them for, and, as he handed one to Hinata, he whispered his idea into her ear. Their stalkers had no chance. She giggled again and took a bite, chewing on it with a smile decorating her lips. Naruto grinned and took a rare bite of his apple, swallowing it in one big gulp. He laughed, showing off bits of apple stuck between his teeth. Hinata was sent into a giggling fit, unable to stop herself from finding the picture amusing. It was still a few minutes before she told him what she had found so funny. Their apples were quickly stripped of all the good portions, nothing left but the cores and seeds. With a bit of planned carelessness, the apple cores were tossed aside, landing soundly on the square rock. With a soft thud, Hinata giggled as a few yelps escaped their target. Naruto chuckled and twisted around, putting his hands on his hips. You can come out now, Konohamaru. There was a small explosion, forcing the box upwards. The plume of smoke that was left over quickly dissipated, revealing 3 miniature forms wearing black goggles. One, Naruto recognized as Konohamaru, the Sandame's Academy student grandson, and the other 2 could only be his friends, Moegi and Udon. Konohamaru really hadn't changed since the first time Naruto had ever met him. He was still a little boy seeking attention that he himself had earned, and had stumbled upon Naruto, who, in his original life, had been doing much the same thing. He was still less than half Naruto's size, and still looked up to the blonde. He still had that childish seriousness that made Hinata giggle every time she saw him. And he still wore goggles identical to the ones Naruto had worn in his past. But there was one change in the 3rd Hokage's grandson, and it was a change Naruto absolutely loathed. The boy visited him almost every day, begging him to play ninja, Nissan. Somehow, Naruto found he couldn't resist the kid's puppy eyes. It was almost like the perfect technique. Anyone with a soul would give in. Naruto had to wonder if Sandame went through something similar, and laughed as he imagined the old man frowning as he gave in to whatever bizarre request his grandson had made. After coughing the fumes from his lungs, Konohamaru straightened, pointing at Naruto. You promised to play ninja with us today, Nissan. Naruto rubbed his chin, then a small smirk crept across his face. A little chakra and 6 hand seals later, His weights were considerably lighter, and he figured he'd have little trouble with the stunt he was about to pull. It really was kind of cruel to trick the 3 kids like he was about to, but they needed to learn just how strong ninja could be. "Tell you what, Konohamaru," Naruto told the boy, "I don't have much time, so we only get to play 2 games." Naruto tossed a kunai about halfway down the alley, watching as it sank into the earth, nothing but a dot on the horizon. He grinned with satisfaction. "In this first game," he said, pointing to the knife he'd just thrown, "the object of it is for you to make it to that kunai before I tag you. I'll give you 5 seconds head start. Ready?" When Konohamaru nodded, he shouted, "Go." The 3 kids took off in a hurry for kunai, thinking they could easily win. They had 5 seconds head start. How could Naruto catch up with them after that? They really should have figured something was up. 5. Naruto finished his countdown, slightly impressed that his Otuto had come very close to winning. In a blur, though, he was gone, disappeared from Hinata's side. Konohamaru and his friends suddenly skidded to a stop as an object appeared in front of them, blocking their path. None of them had even seen whatever it was until it had stopped. The object quickly reached out with very human fingers and flicked the scarf-wearing boy's nose. "Gotcha," Naruto said, grinning down at him. "Wow, Nissan." Konohamaru was awed. Naruto's super speed was something new to the little boy. "Now the next game. Come on." With shouts and yips of delight and merriment, Konohamaru ran down the alley, laughing happily. Naruto followed at a light jog, not really trying to keep up. He'd let Konohamaru have his fun. After all, you were only young once. Ow! Konohamaru had collided with a boy not that much taller than Naruto, wearing a black jumpsuit of some sort. A hood possessing cat-like ears fit snug around his head. Kabuki-style paint decorated his face, making him seem like some kind of actor. A bandaged bulge was slung over his shoulder, a mop of brown hair sticking out of it. Naruto recognized him as Kankuro, Gaara's older brother and a master of puppetry. That hurt. Kankuro lifted Konohamaru up by his scarf, holding the small boy eye level. He scowled, growling angrily at the Sandame's grandson. "Don't," a blonde girl, who Naruto's memories identified as Temari, warned her brother. She wore the standard fishnet bodysuit and some type of lavender-colored robe. It could have been much more conservative, that much the blonde leaf nin was sure of. "We'll get in trouble later." "Let the boy go." Naruto's hand immediately flew towards Masamune's hilt, only to find nothing but thin air. Naruto cursed under his breath. He'd forgotten that he'd left it at home. What lousy timing his forgetfulness had. "Let's play a little before the boss comes," Kankuro laughed, a malicious grin on his face. He'd longed to do this, and would gladly switch Konohamaru for Gaara if he thought he could survive it. Gaara would kill him before he got one shot in. Kankuro smirked, one of his knuckles cracking as he clenched his left fist. "Basically, I hate midgets. Especially the younger ones that are rude, makes me want to kill them." Naruto's chakra flared, his desire for Masamune intensifying. He knew the perfect way to embarrass Kankuro, but he needed his katana. Scratch that, a katana, to make it work. Without a sword, his kenjutsu skill was worthless. A feeling suddenly made itself known in his right hand, and, with his Sharingan, he peered down at it. Invisible chakra was gathering in his palm, roughly shaped like a katana, but his Sharingan saw it clearly. Glancing back up at Kankuro, he wondered if he was right and his idea would work. "Use it," Skeeth's voice whispered, and Naruto had to hide a grin. He knew exactly what was going on now, and he wasn't going to waste this new opportunity. Kankuro pulled his hand back, smirking. "Well, after this one, I'll take care of those other midgets." Naruto brought his hand up, watching with his normal eyes as the chakra in his hand morphed into a familiar sword. He brought it down to the ground, hitting the solid earth and forcing a few chunks of it at Kankuro. "Do Ryu Sen." Earth Dragon Flash. Kankuro flew backwards as the blocks of rock and soil collided with him, dropping Konohamaru the moment they made contact. He rocketed past Temari, landing a few yards behind her, moaning as he tried to stand. He found it quite difficult. Konohamaru stood up and rushed behind Naruto, hiding behind the blonde's leg. He was shivering. Naruto clenched his hand, and with a flare of chakra, the sword disappeared again, back to Naruto's apartment. He'd figure out the dynamics of what had gone on later. Naruto leveled a glare at Kankuro. See, that's all you older people do is underestimate me. It's not a very wise practice, especially where I'm concerned. Naruto allowed a bit of Yuki to travel to his eyes, grinning slightly when Temari flinched. It might cost you more than you're willing to pay. A large amount of controlled killing intent flared up and Naruto tensed, sensing a very familiar presence amongst the muffled bloodlust. He knew who it was, would recognize that feeling anywhere. It had scared him out of his brains in the Chunin exams, but it held nothing over him after he had felt Orochimaru's desire for his blood. Naruto turned around, catching sight of the redhead, Gaara, who stood upside down on the tree behind him. Shukaku's vessel, though he looked at his siblings, was concentrated on the blonde that had trounced the puppet user. Naruto felt his lips twitch. He'd been expecting the gourd-carrying boy, though the killing intent was revealed a little early. Kankuro, Gaara, though his attention seemed to be totally centered on his brother, was definitely focused on Naruto. You're an embarrassment to our village. Kankuro shivered, pleading with his demonic sibling to understand. Listen, Gaara, they started it. Shut up, Gaara growled, his lenient patience gone. Or I'll kill you. Kankuro seemed to shrink in upon himself. Okay, Gaara, I am sorry. The redhead turned his icy teal gaze towards Naruto. Sorry to you guys. In a whirl of sand, he was gone from the tree, reappearing on the ground in front of Temari and Kankuro. It looks like we got here early. The Chunin exams haven't started yet. So, Naruto interrupted the conversation, or monologue, depending on how you looked at it. Are you guys here for the Chunin exams? Gaara nodded, arms crossed in front of his chest. Yes. Uzumaki Naruto, Naruto said, introducing himself. He would take the initiative this time. There was no Sasuke around to break the ice. Sabaku no Gaara, Gaara replied, strangely courteous. I want to fight you, Uzumaki-san. So do I, Naruto told him, then he grinned, especially if Shukaku-kun comes out to play. Skeeth would have a lot of fun. Naruto noticed a red tint to the whites of Gaara's eyes as the sand trio left, no doubt to prevent an incident. He squeezed Hinata's hand reassuringly, smiling as they continued their trip to Ichiraku's. What he'd done probably wasn't very smart, but he'd done stupider things. It didn't take them long to reach the ramen stand, and Naruto had to grin as he caught sight of familiar black hair in a familiar style sitting in one of the stools. He'd almost wondered if he'd go without seeing his only cousin for the whole day. Hey, Sasuke. Hinata and Naruto sat down and ordered as Sasuke quickly ate his ramen, though it was nowhere near as fast as Naruto when he was hungry. It seemed that, despite living with the blonde for nearly 6 years, Sasuke still retained some of his Uchiha manners. That, and he didn't have a bottomless stomach and a hollow leg. I'll have a chicken ramen, Naruto told the old man, slapping down some money. Anyo, I'll have the same, Hinata said, seated comfortably next to Naruto. Sitting there, joking with Sasuke and romancing with Hinata, Naruto came to a realization. He liked this second chance of his, no matter how strange it was. Things were different, for the better. Hinata was confident in herself and now his girlfriend. She was stronger, and he doubted she'd lose to Neji again. Sasuke wasn't so obsessed with his revenge, and, with Naruto to help him, his Sharingan was more advanced. Haku and Zabuza were alive and a part of Konoha. Everything was good. Naruto came to a singular conclusion. He liked things how they were now, and he wouldn't change it a bit. They had been waiting for nearly 3 hours now. Sasuke, Naruto, and Hinata were leaning against the railing of the bridge that they usually met at. Every day, they got up at 8 in the morning to train with their sensei, and every morning it was the same thing. They'd get there, wait a few hours, usually 3 or 4, then Kakashi would show up and tell them what choir or menial task they'd be doing for the day. It was almost a routine, for him to be so late and then pop some stupid mission up on them. And it was always boring, no matter what anyone said. They'd been waiting particularly long that day. All of them had gotten up early because Kakashi had said there was something important he had to tell them about. Hell, Naruto even got a new alarm clock to make sure he was at least on time, since he figured he might know what it was Kakashi was going to say. They'd all expected the copy ninja, Hatake Kakashi, to be on time to an important meeting. After about a year of training with Kakashi, both in his original life and in his second chance, Naruto really should have had something figured out by then. Kakashi was always late. No exceptions. Naruto sighed, rubbing the pad of his thumb over the back of Hinata's forearm. She was leaning up against him, sleeping soundly on top of his chest, his arms holding her still so she wouldn't fall. He'd seen her eyes drooping about an hour ago and offered himself to be her pillow. Besides, he liked the feeling of warmth that being close to her brought him. Naruto glared as a poof of smoke announced Kakashi's arrival on top of the arch standing over the bridge. With a scowl, he hissed, "You're late." Nudging Hinata awake, Naruto's angry gaze never left Kakashi, pinning him down with a cold stare. As Hinata's eyes cracked open, Kakashi seemed oblivious of the blonde's ire, even going so far as to casually flip the page in his book. "Well," Kakashi drawled, eyes never leaving his page, "it seems I've found you all in a good mood." Sasuke held back a snarl. "I've got some good news," the gray-haired Junin continued on, ignoring the fierce glares he was on the receiving end of. "I've nominated you 3 for the Chunin exams. It's up to you if you want to go." He produced 3 tickets, handing 1 each to his students. "That's all for today. Hand them in at room 301 in the academy tomorrow. Yane." In a plume of smoke, he disappeared again. Hinata walked into her clan's infamous mansion, kicking her sandals off at the door. Absent-mindedly, she followed the maze of halls towards her room, having plenty of practice in such a thing. She'd done so every day for nearly 6 years, and there weren't any new additions to the Hyuga compound that would confuse her. Hinata paused in front of her father's office, reflexively looking towards the source. Her father gestured for her to come in, sitting at his desk in his personal study with the door slightly ajar. "We have something to talk about. Something important." Her instincts screaming at her to run, Hinata walked delicately into the sunlit room, tense and ready to flee. Quietly, she closed the door behind her at her father's soft command, sitting down. Despite knowing that he wouldn't hurt her or yell at her, her knuckles were white as she gripped the hazel wooden arms of her chair nervously. "I am well aware," Heishi started, his eyes closed and his hands folded in front of his mouth, "that you want to become a medic nin, and that you have no desire to be the heir. As you are aware, refusing to be the heir means you would be put into the branch family." Hinata felt dread slid down her throat like ice, landing roughly in her stomach. She felt she knew where this conversation was going, and she didn't like the idea of the choices being presented to her. However, Heishi continued, his eyes focused on his daughter, "I have done something to prevent this problem. And, if my calculations are right and I know you as well as I tend to think I do, you will find my solution most satisfactory." Hinata bit her lip, thousands of possibilities running through her mind in just a span of a few seconds. Her grip on the chair's arms tightened, and her knuckles were white as bone. There were very few solutions to the issue that her father had informed her she faced. Most of those solutions weren't very satisfactory, at least, in her opinion. "Why yes, father?" Hinata asked meekly. As much as she dreaded the answer, she needed to know what to expect. "There are very few things I could accomplish in regards to this situation without the elders trying to interfere," her father told her. "Setting up a marriage for you is the most favorable answer, and, as such, that is exactly what I did." With who? Despite the depression and sadness building in her bones, Hinata still wanted to know what clan prodigy she would be stuck with. It wouldn't be the same as marrying Naruto, but... "Don't look so down, Masumi." A light smirk crossed Hiashi's face, as if he was privy to some information she was not. "You are already very close to the man that has been chosen for you. In fact, I'm quite sure you'll be happy with this arrangement of mine once you find out who it is. You two have been dating for a few weeks, after all." Hinata felt her mouth fall open slightly. "Why, you mean?" "Yes," her father said. "The man you are to marry is none other than Uzumaki Naruto. I'll leave it up to you to inform him of this joyous occasion." A day later, outside the academy where the Chunin exams started. As Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke reached the second floor, 2 kids a few years older than them were blocking the entrance to the first exam. 2 other genin, who seemed to be only a year older than Naruto, were knocked backwards. One of the genin blocking the way chuckled, "We're just thinning out those that will fail anyway." "What's wrong with that?" Sasuke smirked, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "That may be a good idea, but..." Naruto grinned a feral grin. "Take that genjutsu down. We're going to room 301, not 201. The air around the room's label shimmered as the genjutsu dissolved, changing from 301 to 201. The first guard smirked. Not bad, but all you did was see through it. He rushed Sasuke, sending a roundhouse kick to the Uchiha's face. Sasuke responded in turn with a kick of his own. A large blur appeared between them, grabbing hold of both their legs. Two genin had interrupted the fight. Lee was the first, his hands held fast to Sasuke and the guard's shins. Standing next to the guard was Naruto, Masamune held to the boy's neck. Threateningly, his other hand on its sheath, he had his own impression to make. As the four of them returned to neutral stances, Naruto sheathed his sword with a soft clink. He was wearing different clothing now, something he happened to like quite a bit. Around his shoulders and hiding a small part of his chin and all of his neck was a white scarf that seemed to be missing its ends, since they were nowhere to be seen. It all looked like one endless object that just continued around in a circle. A hood-less zip-up, cloth jacket, light and comfortable in the hottest of weather, covered his torso. The sleeves were light gray, contrasting to the white of the scarf and the black of the rest of the jacket. Two small white strips of cloth that went down either side of the zipper stood out in the pitch darkness. The kanji, shi, for death, was stitched in white silk on the upper left side of the jacket's front. A thin white sash that most samurai wore, identified as a dugi obi, was tied around his waist, holding his sword. He'd brought Masamune along, since he was unsure of how well this new technique Skeeth had given him worked. It could only add to the mesmerizing look generated by the contrast of colors in his clothing. Black cargo pants, nearly identical to Gaara's, protected his legs. The only things that were different were the bandages that started nearly 2/3 of the way down his shins. They were black instead of white. 3 kunai pouches were attached to his obi in the back, carefully arranged so as to not interfere with his sword. His sandals, like always, were black. "I want to fight you, Sasuke-san." Lee stood in his ready pose, looking much like a miniature clone of Maida Guy with the green spandex he wore. Naruto thanked God and whoever else lived in the heavens that the spandex wasn't as tight in certain key spots. He could go his entire life without seeing something like that, and he expected, judging by how sick-looking her face was, that Hinata could too. To prove that a genius of hard work, like myself, can beat a clan prodigy like you. A fire seemed to blaze in Lee's onyx eyes, his face set in determination. This was the kind of thing he lived for, Naruto knew, and he wouldn't give up. Wait a minute. Everyone looked to Hinata, who had thrown her arms out to stop the oncoming battle. We don't have tea time to do something like that. The Chunin exam will be starting any minute now. Lee looked over to the clock and nodded grimly. It appears that Hinata-sama is correct. But we shall fight someday, Sasuke-san. And I look forward to that day. In a blur, Lee was gone again, leaving Team 7 to stare at the space he had previously occupied. Sasuke shook his head. What a weirdo. He may be weird, Naruto told him, but he's one hell of a taijutsu expert. His sense of fashion could use a bit of training, though. Anyo, Naruto-kun, Sasuke-kun, Hinata said, pointing towards the clock. We don't have time for this. We need to head to the Chunin exams. With haste born of necessity, the three of them leapt up the stairs, and onward to the Chunin selection exams. Naruto tensed as they walked through the large double doors, trying to calm his temper as he realized they'd be meeting Kabuto very soon. He'd have to restrain himself pretty well to keep his cool around the traitor. The betrayal of the imposter Genin had struck Naruto hard, but he wouldn't let himself get attached to the treacherous gray-haired nin this time. No sooner had they walked through the double doors than a rabid blonde girl latched onto Sasuke's arm, rubbing her face against his biceps. Naruto would swear that it was impossible to run that fast. Sasuke-kun. You're late, Sasuke-kun. Naruto suppressed a shudder as the girl hung off his cousin's shoulder, whispering in his ear. She had a ridiculous grin on her face that many found creepy, and Naruto had to shut his eyes. It's been a while, so I've been waiting in excitement. You guys are taking this exam thing too? Man, this is so troublesome. Naruto recognized the voice. It belonged to a true genius. Turning, he caught sight of Nara Shikamaru's distinct, pineapple-shaped hair and the obese form of the Nara's best friend, Akamichi Choji. Naruto grinned, Well, if it isn't the idiot trio. Well, Naruto turned again to find Kiba sauntering over, the miniature Akamaru on top his head. It seems that the entire Rookie 9 is here. I wonder how far we'll get, Sasuke-kun. Haruno Sakura and Yamanaka Ino growled at the cocky boy, being rabid fangirls of Sasuke's. If the looks they gave him were any indication, he'd better shut up, or he'd be neutered in a very painful way. Naruto was sure of that, and Shino, the last member of Team 8, seemed to agree, if the way his eyebrows knit together was any indication. Kiba's gaze traveled over to Hinata, and he immediately brightened up. Hey, Hinata. Ditch that loser and come over here. Oh, Naruto thought frightfully, he has no idea what he just said. One of the few things that could make Hinata truly mad was someone saying something bad about Naruto. Kiba, unfortunately for him, had just made that mistake. Anyo, Kiba-san. Hinata started out softly. Naruto winced. That tone was deceiving. I mean no disrespect, but, shut up. Looks like you're at the bottom of the food chain, dog boy. Naruto grinned. Hey, you guys, you should be quieter. Naruto had to squash his anger down with an iron fist to keep himself in check as Kabuto the traitor walked up behind them. Naruto did his best to ignore the silver-haired boy, even going so far as to grind his teeth subtly to distract himself. He didn't like the boy, no matter how kind he acted. And his nin info cards were very dangerous, if they found out certain details. Do you have information on Uzumaki Naruto of the Hidden Leaf? Naruto's eyes snapped onto Hyuga Neji, Hinata's cousin and the one who had asked the question. He felt his mouth drop open, his surprise overwhelming his sense of normal behavior. He had never expected Neji to ask that question, hadn't thought Neji would lower himself to doing such a thing. Naruto could only watch, too stunned to do anything, as Kabuto channeled chakra to his hand and swiped a card from the top of the deck. With flourish, he twisted it in his fingers and read its contents out loud. Uzumaki Naruto, he said, eyes sweeping back and forth. Age: 12. His teammates are Uchiha Sasuke and Hyuga Hinata. His sensei is Hitaki Kakashi, the copy ninja. Missions: 30D rank and 1C rank. His specialties are with fire and wind jutsu. Kabuto's eyes seemed to widen a bit. His ninjutsu, strength, speed, and stamina are off the charts. I don't think I've seen Junin with stats this high. Neji frowned and left to the table he had been sitting at, rejoining his teammates Tenten and Lee. He seemed slightly less satisfied with the results than he had expected he would be, and sulked, trying to glare a hole in Naruto's skull. All tension aside, Naruto whirled around, his eyes focused on Kabuto again. It'd be best if you avoided certain villages. Oh? Kiba asked, arching an eyebrow. And which villages might those be? Stop trying to act cool, Kiba. Sakura bopped him on the head. Only Sasuke-kun can act cool. Yeah. Ino ganged up on him. I agree with forehead girl. Stop acting cool. What did you call me, Ino pig? You heard me, billboard brow. Shaking his head, Kabuto turned his attention to the remaining genin. Anyway, it'd be a good idea if you avoided the aim nin over there. They have a dangerous temper. And Iwa nin, too. They aren't very happy with Konoha, and Naruto bears a striking resemblance to the object of their hate. What do you mean? Shikamaru asked, rubbing his shoulder with a half-interested look on his face. Well, the gray-haired nin started, if you take away the age and clothing difference, and the whisker marks, Naruto could pass off as the fourth Hokage himself. As long as you guys stay away from them, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Alright. You maggots. Naruto swiveled around towards Ibiki's rough voice. Sakura and Ino quickly calmed. Calm down and shut up. Naruto felt his eyes droop, his head resting on his arms. It had only been 5 minutes since the exam had started, and he was already bored out of his mind. He thought that he could put up with the long wait that was bound to come with taking the exam, but it seemed that he was falling short in the patience area. Numbers 62, 79, and 12, you're out of here. Naruto turned his half-lidded gaze to a familiar face. The last time he had seen it, it belonged to one of the genin guarding the door to room 201. Azuma was his name, if he remembered correctly, and he was a member of Ibiki's entourage. 26, 39, and 43, you're gone too. An Iwa nin team stood from the crowd. grumbling darkly as they walked out the door. Naruto snorted. Even in his own drowsy state, he could tell they were cheating. Now that was sad. Hinata spared a glance towards her left, looking at Naruto. His head rested on his folded arms, leaning on the desk and covering a large portion of his paper. His paper, what she could see of it, was unmarked, save for his name. She didn't know why he wasn't answering the questions, but she didn't like the effect it could have on their team. Quietly, so as not to alert the Chunins watching her, she nudged him with her foot, trying to wake him. Anyo, Naruto-kun, wake up. You have a test to finish. Alright, he mumbled, his lips barely moving. Don't need to worry. I go, it all under control. Biting her lip and still worried, Hinata took his word for it and went back to her own test. Alright, Ibiki said, his arms crossed. It's time for the 10th question. It's do or die, so listen up. Naruto cracked an eye open, listening half-heartedly as the exam proctor explained the rules for the last question. Wow, he marveled silently. 45 minutes sure passes quickly. You reject the question, raise your hand. Once you and your teammates' numbers are confirmed, you will be allowed to leave. This bull, Naruto said, after watching nearly 6 teams leave. 1. Matter what rank you are when you face an enemy. I could fight the Raikage and he wouldn't give a damn if I was Genin or Junin. He'd show me no more mercy just because I'm a Genin. He sat up, squaring his shoulders and setting his eyes on Ibiki determinedly, so I'm staying, regardless of what might happen. So, Ibiki's gaze swept the room. Anyone else going to reject the question? Nobody moved, and the room was deadly silent. Ibiki smirked. Well then, for all of you that remain, I have good news. Everyone held his or her breath as the anticipation increased. A large number of them leaned forward on their desks, eagerly awaiting the news. Congratulations, Ibiki's smirk grew. All of you have passed the first section of the Chunin exams. A window shattered, a rolled-up ball of cloth flying through it. As it reached Ibiki, it unraveled, 4 kunai pinning its corners to the ceiling and floor. A woman was soon discovered to have been hiding inside it, her purple hair pulled into a loose clip on the back of her head. Don't get so excited. I'm the proctor for the second exam and it won't be so easy, she grinned. I'm Mitarashi Anko. Next time, they've cleared the first exam successfully, but the danger of the Chunin selection exam has yet to pass. The encounter with Orochimaru in the Forest of Death, though it turns out better than expected, leaves Naruto fearful of Hinata's safety. With Orochimaru focused on merging the Byakugan with the Sharingan, the Snake Sennin will take an unhealthy interest in a few of the Genin. Naruto's fears are justified. But Kyuubi has a plan to help Naruto's fiancée protect herself. Give her an avatar of her own, disguised as a normal summon. All Naruto has to do to create this summon is design its body and write the summoning scroll, and the Kyuubi will handle its creation and powers. It won't be nearly as powerful as yours, though, so I make no promises about its ability to fight other avatars. Next time, in a simple change, the Sharingan Volume 1, Rebirth. Skeeth's Fury and Korbennik's Birth. The chapter you've all been waiting for. Hang on to your pants, it will be here soon. This is not a sequel to ASCTR. This doesn't have anything to do with ASCTR. Disclaimer. I do not own Naruto, Rurouni Kenshin, or hack. 3 chapters in under a month. This has got to be a freaking record. Everyone celebrate my greatness. Ninpo. Kachiyose no Gongen, Ninja Art. Avatars Summoning. I'll explain this later, when another person displays this ability, like Gaara. Taiyushin Itu Tansen, Sun God's Single Strike Edge. Naruto's first original jutsu, during his second chance, anyway. A sort of mimicry of Kakashi's. Reikari. Consumes an ungodly amount of chakra. It turns the chakra concentrated to one's fist into hot flames. The user remains unharmed, but anything else that touches it will feel as if they had been stricken by the sun, thus its name. It is also very much advised that you have the Sharingan as well. If you miss and can't keep Taiyushin Itu Tansen active, you're a goner. Sesha, I'm going to steal this little tidbit from Rurouni Kenshin. It means, this one. It's a very humble way to describe oneself. Naruto will use it during the beginning of his relationship with Hinata. Since Naruto is the bane of Konoha, he will feel he isn't worthy of Hinata's affection. Sesha wa kanza shiteru dezu. Sorkare wa dezu. This one is thankful. That he is. Aishiteru. I love you updates will be slow for all my stories, due primarily to the new school year. Steadfast, my friends, and good luck. James Daniel Fox. James Daniel Fox, signature best viewed in Wendy medium. Font style. Skeith's Fury and Corbennic's Birth a Simple Change. The Sharingan by James D. Fox. Chapter 5. Skeith's Fury and Corbennic's Birth. Let's go! Enko shouted, pumping her fist into the air enthusiastically. Follow me. Pushing the fabric away, Ibiki leaned over to whisper in her ear, bad timing. A blush slowly spread over Enko's face, her hand frozen in midair. Slowly, flooded with embarrassment, she brought it down. Quiet for the first time since she had arrived, her eyes swept the half-empty room, scanning it. She seemed surprised by their numbers, and Naruto had to smirk as she turned to yell at Ibiki, 78? You left 26 teams, Ibiki? Ibiki smirked. What can I say? There were a lot of exceptional ones this time. Oh well. Doesn't matter, anyway, Enko smirked, licking her lips in anticipation. I'll cut their numbers in half with the second exam. A few of the genin shivered in trepidation, worried slightly about her bold proclamation. The only ones that seemed unfazed were Team 7, Team 8, Team 10, Team Guy, Kabuto's team, and the newcomer team from Grass. Naruto was grinning. Ah. I'm getting excited. Enko licked her lips again, her smirk growing. I'll explain everything once we get a change of scenery. TH's stuffy old room is too small. Follow me. Enko led them to a large, fenced-in forest comprised of impossibly large trees with huge, twisted, unnatural trunks. A decrepit sign hung from the locked gate by aged and rusted chains. A single warning printed on it in fading letters. Danger, stay out. Welcome to the stage for the second test. Enko stopped in front of the fence, her light-hearted voice a screaming contradiction to the dark woods in front of them. She turned, her trench coat swaying slightly. A malicious grin tugged at the corners of her lips. This is training area 44, lovingly called, the Forest of Death. Unlucky for you guys, you'll soon find out why. Yeah, Naruto snorted, making a show of quaking. I'm shivering. Naruto tilted his head to the side, allowing Enko's kunai to fly past harmlessly. Then, faster than most could follow, his hand darted backwards, a kunai of his own clamped in his iron grip. There was a clang as his steel clashed with Enko's, who had occupied the empty space behind him. He grinned. Enko grinned back, pushing herself away and returning to her former position. A smirk crossed her face as her gaze swept across the assembled genin. Seems we've got some talented wannabes here today. They'll be the first to go. Now, she said, reaching into her trench coat and giving a select. Few quite a view. Sasuke shook, chanting to himself. I am not into older women. I am not into older women. Before we begin, there's a little something I have to pass out to you little brats. She whipped out a stack of papers, flashing them in the younger ninjas' faces. You must sign these agreement waivers. There'll be deaths in this one, and if you don't sign, I'll be responsible. After the papers made their way around, she continued, now that I have your attention, let's explain the second test. Naruto tuned her out, having already heard the lecture once. He knew this test like the back of his hand. It was a battle for scrolls. One heaven and one earth, and you needed 2 in order to get into the tower in the center. They had 5 days. Any teams who opened their scrolls before they got to the tower were disqualified. Exchange your team's forms for a scroll and get ready to begin. Enko paused, looking the assembled ninja over. One final word of advice, don't die. Quickly, everyone turned in their forms for a scroll, huddling with their teammates to discuss battle strategies. Kiba seemed to be bragging to Sakura about something, flexing his muscles while she rolled her eyes. Shino looked on impassively, his face ever devoid of emotion. Naruto's gaze swept over to Team 10, where Choji was snacking on another bag of chips. Lazy as ever, Shikamaru stood with his hands in his pockets, staring up at the clouds in the afternoon sky, eyes half-lidded. Ino stood with her arms crossed impatiently, a frown on her face as her foot tapped incessantly. She was staring off into the distance somewhere, undoubtedly trying to distract herself from her abysmal teammates. A hand landed lightly on his shoulder, showering his nostrils with the smell of lavender. He turned, greeting Hinata's smiling face. "Anyo. Naruto-kun, it's almost time to start." "Get ready to start." Anko's voice floated in from the background. "Follow an instructor and go to a gate. The exam begins in 30 minutes. Smiling, Naruto followed a silent instructor to a gate, his team tailing behind him. Sasuke was fidgeting excitedly and Hinata was walking confidently, but Naruto could practically feel the anxiety rolling off of her. She was nervous, and, he had to admit, he was too. This was the turning point. If he could prevent Orochimaru from marking Sasuke, then he wouldn't have much trouble keeping everything in line. A shrill whistle blew, Anko's voice accompanying it. The second test of the Chunin exams now begins. In a collective blur of movement, the various teams leapt through the gates, most intent on finding a second scroll and making it to the center. There was one team, though, that was focused on something else. Orochimaru grinned wickedly. Naruto suddenly halted on the forest floor, his face twisted into a frown. Sasuke and Hinata landed next to him, shooting him worried looks. "What is it, Naruto?" Sasuke urged, anxiety in his obsidian gaze. Naruto frown deepened a little. "I have to take a piss." Sasuke's right eyebrow twitched. He brought a swift fist down on his cousin's head, relishing the curse of pain he got in return. He shook his head, muttering, "Idiot." Naruto headed towards the nearest crop of trees, rubbing the back of his head. "I'll be back in a minute, don't worry." "Don't get lost," Sasuke said, grinning. Naruto shot him a half glare over his shoulder. "What are you? My mother?" There was a pause as Naruto walked into the cluster of bushes, and silence fell. All was quiet, except for the zzzzzzzupt, as Naruto pulled down his fly and prepared to water the tree. Then, all was quiet, save the distant sounds of animals. It was broken by Naruto's curse. "Damn it, why'd I get all the freaky ones? Stupid pervert." There was a loud thud as a body flew from behind the tree Naruto was leaking on, the blob of cloth, flesh, and hair moving too fast to make out. It hit a tree not far off, leaving a human-shaped imprint in its wake. Whoever it was, he or she was definitely unconscious. Sasuke knew firsthand just how brutal Naruto's right hook was when he was angry, and almost pitied the poor bastard that had tried to sneak up on his cousin. Sound returned a second time as Naruto's zipper was pulled up again, and he walked out of the tree a few seconds later, mumbling about perverted aim nin and just what he'd like to do to them. Sasuke shivered as he caught the word castrate. Naruto walked up to the unconscious ninja and kicked him really hard in the ribs, grinning when he heard a barely audible crunch. He'd cracked the shinobi's ribs, so the poor boy would definitely be feeling it in the morning. If he had an ounce of pity for Ninja of the Hidden Rain Village, it was overshadowed by his anger. Naruto reached down and searched the older boy's kunai pouch for a scroll, grumbling when he found none. He hadn't really expected to find anything, but he'd been a bit hopeful. It would have made things so much easier for him. Right then, Naruto rubbed his hands together eagerly as he turned towards his friends, a grin threatening to split his face in half. "We need a password." "What kind of password?" Sasuke questioned, arms folded in front of his chest. "It has to be something only we would know. Something that's very unexpected." Hinata gave her input, brow knit and chewing on her lower lip as she tried to find something that fit the criteria she had just set forth. "I got it." Naruto snapped his fingers. "The question will be, what is Naruto's secret weapon?" "How do we answer, Naruto-kun?" "It's simple," Naruto told them, nodding sagely. "The answer is, Kara no Sora, empty skies, all right?" Sasuke and Hinata nodded. "Good," he said, flashing them a grin. "Now, it's time to get." He was cut off as a gust of gale force wind swept the clearing, picking the teammates up and throwing them to random places. Sasuke and Hinata managed to stick together, only a few feet from the clearing they had been standing in, but Naruto, who was not so lucky, was flung into the foliage and out of sight. Sasuke and Hinata pulled themselves from the bushes they had landed in and moved to the center of the clearing, waiting for whatever had initiated the attack to appear. "Ow!" Naruto stumbled out from behind the trees, scratches on his face. "You guys okay?" "Wait," Sasuke demanded, holding out a kunai. "First, the password. What's Naruto's secret weapon?" Naruto grinned. "Kara no Sora, am I right, Sasuke?" Hinata? Naruto twisted to the side as the kunai that had been in Sasuke's hand whirled past him, coming dangerously close to his midsection. Whoa. You're wrong, Sasuke growled, a fierce glare set on his face. You're not Naruto because Naruto never fails to use the chan suffix when talking to Hinata. Show yourself, imposter. The imposter smirked in a way that Naruto never would, his cover blown. It was an evil smirk that held none of the mischief that Naruto's evil smirks held. The wretched smile that pulled at the imposter's lips was purely malicious, and held none of the friendly warmth that Naruto seemed to radiate. In a puff of smoke, the Naruto in front of them turned into a grass ninja with long black hair and weirdly shaped lips. A bamboo shade reminiscent of the ones belonging to Akatsuki placed on the person's head. Impressive that you knew, the imposter's voice was silky and smooth, a perfect blend of male and female. This will be more fun than I thought. Naruto knelt, groaning and moaning, where he had landed. He had forgotten how damn painful his adventure with the blast of air had been, and he was paying for it now. He stopped cussing for a second as a familiar smell drifted into his nostrils. Damn. Why can't I place that scent? Opening his eyes, he took notice of a large shadow on the ground in front of him, way too big to be his shadow. Shit. Naruto dove out of the way as the snake tried to take a bite out of him, and gaining a mouthful of dirt in the process. Shaking the rocky material from its dripping fangs, the snake soon turned, redirecting its attention on him, hissing angrily. Naruto stood, yanking his sword from his sheath. Masamune's blade sang as it came free, gleaming in the sparse sunlight that showered down between the massive tree limbs. The silver shine of the katana flashed as Naruto moved into a ready stance, knees bent. The snake reared back, preparing to strike a second time. Its head shot forth, ready to swallow the blonde whole, sword and all. But Naruto was ready and jumped up, over the creature's gaping maw and into the air. Naruto came straight down, tip of his blade poised to sink deep into the serpent's thick scales. He crashed into the beast, his sword diving past the beast's strong hide up to the handguard, nearly splitting its brain in half. Masamune was quickly pulled from its slimy confines and placed back in its sheath, clean, for the most part. Naruto sighed, and with a few half-hearted seals, the extra weight on his body was gone, leaving him at full strength. Without a second glance at the dead beast, Naruto took to the trees, towards his friend and his most precious person. The grass nin smirked at the genin in front of him. You want my earth scroll? Yes? Because you have the heaven scroll? His unnaturally long tongue slithered over his earth scroll, the smirk never leaving his lips. At an agonizing pace, he slowly inserted the scroll into his mouth, his tongue still curled around it. Sasuke and Hinata could only watch in disgust as the scroll slid down his throat, bulging inside of his esophagus. Grinning evilly, he stared them down. Now, let's begin the battle for each other's scrolls, with our lives on the line. Hinata and Sasuke felt their limbs freeze as the terror of death fell upon them, preventing them from moving an inch of their own will. His limbs shaking uncontrollably, Sasuke keeled over, revisiting his lunch. Is this some sort of genjutsu? No, he's not using an illusion. This is pure fear, created by his killing intent. The grass nin chuckled lightly. Heh heh, you can no longer move. With an almost lazy flick of his wrist, he flung two kunai at Sasuke and Hinata. Using pain to override fear by stabbing himself with a kunai, Sasuke picked up Hinata and dashed for cover, barely dodging the enemy's weapons. After putting some distance between himself and the nutcase, he stopped behind some trees, panting in exertion and to return the feeling of breathing back to his lungs. Hinata sat beside him, Byakugan activated and searching for any disturbances in the forest. She soon caught sight of a snake hanging from the tree above them and quickly warned Sasuke via a tap on the shoulder. With a well-practiced jump, they flung themselves off the tree and into another, narrowly escaping the serpent's large jaws. When it followed his movements, he flung as many kunai and shuriken into its body as he dared, watching as it fell against the tree, supposedly dead. With the immediate threat gone, Sasuke leaned back against the tree he was in, sighing in relief. It was over. His breath caught when he heard a disturbing noise coming from the snake he had just killed. Almost afraid of what he would find, Sasuke turned his head back towards the colossal reptile, pleading with whoever controlled his fate that luck would be on his side. His eyes widened in horror as the grass nin rose from the snake's corpse, staring at him. You guys shouldn't relax for even a moment. Prey should always be trying to run away in the presence of a predator like me. With his piece said, his body lengthened as he slithered up the tree he was in, much like the snake before him. He stopped short when kunai and shuriken impacted the trunk in front of his face. Sorry I'm late, Sasuke, Hinata-chan, a voice said, but I had a little trouble with a pest. Seems it wanted to know all about my secret weapon. Hinata and Sasuke's heads whipped around towards the source, a blonde genin wearing varying shades of black, gray, and white, a sword tied to his hip and a vulpine grin stretching across his lips. Hinata felt hope fill her being, replacing the despair she had previously experienced. Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he looked at his opponent, and his grin disappeared. Tugging his sword and its saya from his belt, he tossed it towards his girlfriend. Keep Masamune safe, Hinata-chan. I'm going all out against this guy. Hinata nodded, holding the sword against her chest as if it were the most important task she had ever been given. Naruto flashed her a quick, thank you, smile, then turned back to his enemy, flashing through hand seals. The grass nin's eyes widened at the seal sequence, especially the impressive speed with which it was done. A summoning jutsu? His seals completed, Naruto slammed his hands into the wood, slowly pulling two summoned objects from their depths. The crimson hilts emerged first, the grips wrapped in tattered white material. The places where the handguards would normally be followed, bare of anything resembling such things. Then, the blades came. Odd pieces of metal coming up from the hilts and obscuring most of the black steel on both of the flat sides. When they were fully revealed, Naruto held them opposite the way most would expect, and both blades were only about half as long as a normal katana, though almost twice as wide. The blades, which would normally be situated a few inches above his thumbs, were now about 2 inches below his pinky fingers. Grinning, Naruto held the blades in front of his torso, crisscrossing his arms so that the obscured blades shot out past his shoulders, almost looking like spiked shoulder pads from Orochimaru's distance. Naruto's grin widened. Kara no Sora. With a soft clink, the objects obscuring the blades shot outwards, revealed to be 2 extra blades on each sword, nearly as long as the center blade. The outermost blades were curved outwards drastically, like the bottom half of the letter Z, to provide more damage during a stab, or give an advantage over an enemy using a regular sword. The 2 blades closest to his elbows were curved inward slightly, much like the blade of a scythe. They looked cumbersome, though everyone present could somehow tell that he knew how to use them. The grass nin smiled. My, Naruto-kun, you certainly look threatening up there like that. With a speed that rivaled Lee's, Naruto had disappeared from the tree branch he was standing on, and was suddenly standing on a tree branch right next to the enemy, one of his swords cutting into the wood that the grass nin had been occupying less than a second ago. The grass nin smirked. You're quite fast, too. With a soft tug, the Kara no Sora that had sunk into the tree was pulled free, as if it had never been stuck in the first place. It was swung again, the second blade following it, creating a long string of combos designed to kill NY1, no matter their strength or size. The grass nin hissed as a part of the clothing covering his shoulder was torn away, a shallow cut dragging itself across his pale skin. He sped up, careful to dodge each of the lightning-fast blows that were raining upon him. He wouldn't underestimate this boy again. A sudden kick to his midsection threw the grass nin against the tree. 2 clones immediately appeared and pinned him to the bark, preventing his escape in his stunned state. Kaden. Karyu Enden. A dragon of fire crashed into the grass nin, destroying the clones and drawing a cry of anguish from his lips. The skin of his face started to melt away, his clothes suffering a large amount of irreversible damage. The purple rope-like belt was beginning to disintegrate. Finally, it ended, and the grass nin was a little worse for wear. Naruto stared, not daring to believe he had defeated his most hated enemy so easily. And he was right to be cautious, for the man in front of him melted into mud. Cursing inventively, Naruto swiveled around, tightening his grip on Kara no Sora. He knew that his enemy would be hard to drive off, but with his experience he had expected to be able to pull such a thing off with just his blades. It was his biggest mistake, and it had probably cost him the opportunity that he had needed. Heh, the voice was deeper now, but still silky and smooth. My, Naruto-kun. You are quite strong, aren't you? There was a soft sound and Naruto felt a familiar presence behind him. It's too bad that you'd never leave Konoha. There's so much I could do for this wonderful ability of yours. Naruto spun around, striking out with Kara no Sora in the process. Orochimaru dodged it easily, sending a hard kick to Naruto's stomach. Naruto went soaring into the charred wood that he had tried to fry his enemy on, then fell forward, seemingly unconscious. His blades disappeared in a puff of smoke. Orochimaru turned back towards his other two targets, inspecting them closely. For the first time, he noticed Hinata's pearly eyes. "Ah! My! A Hyuga!" He giggled evilly. "What an opportunity this is! An effective test subject for a merge between Byakugan and Sharingan. Ooh! Sasuke-kun isn't the only one on this team worth taking." He seemed to think on something, then smirked. Yes. I believe a heaven seal would work quite well on you, little Hyuga. It is a shame, though, that I have to mar that perfect skin of yours." His hands moved upward, but Orochimaru froze in mid-seal as a malevolent chakra rose up behind him. He whirled around to find Naruto standing, eyes a gleaming red and an aura of chakra swirling around him. Cursing his forgetfulness, he reached into his kunai pouch, only to stop as the boy roared. "Skeeth!" Orochimaru had to shield his eyes from the intense glow as the chakra condensed around Naruto, forming a sort of humanoid figure. There was a shift as the condensed chakra grew, creating some shape of some sort. Orochimaru could only guess what was happening, closing his eyes tight so as to prevent blindness. Gua! Orochimaru wondered what the hell had happened as the demonic energy that had stayed contained around the blonde boy suddenly exploded outward and all around, seeming to double in intensity and size. It weighed heavily on the evil man, and he felt the true terror of death, much like what he had inflicted on Hinata and Sasuke with his killing intent. Gaowa! The chakra suddenly doubled again, pressing down even more on the snake senin. His curiosity too great to ignore, Orochimaru opened his eyes as the flare of light settled. His jaw went slack and his arms fell to his sides, limp. Skeeth, imposing and pitch black, stood tall, its massive figure rivaling the Ichibi no Shukaku in terms of mass and pure size. Its three red eyes glowed as it glared down at its victim, with very little effort or pause. Skeeth pulled its arms back, preparing some sort of attack. Orochimaru's eyes widened as a long staff appeared in Skeeth's monstrous hands. A long, curved blade made of red chakra appeared at one end, forming a deadly scythe. Even the fabled Shinigami would cower in fear, staring down this large entity of death and destruction. Survival instincts kicking in, Orochimaru fled, completely forgetting about Sasuke and giving him the cursed seal. Skeeth roared as its gaze followed its enemy. Had it been capable of humor, it would have snorted at the target's pathetic escape plan. Orochimaru had run right through Skeeth's legs, just barely making it under the curtain of crimson chakra that made up Skeeth's cloak. There was a puff of smoke, and Orochimaru was riding away on a snake, desperately trying to get away from the death incarnate that was haunting his every step. It turned out that the serpent couldn't keep up with Skeeth's superior abilities as Skeeth's scythe came down, cleaving the summon in half. The scythe was pulled back again, even as his target threw summon after summon in an attempt to distract him from his goal. None were successful, and most were defeated by the imposing spikes on the avatar's clawed fingers. Even Manda, the boss summon for the slimy snakes, could not do more than annoy the giant beast. Manda wrapped his scaly body around Skeeth, trying to squeeze the life from the imposing avatar. Careful of the spikes on the creature's knees, the enormous serpent tightened his grasp on the black beast, attempting to crush the breath from his enemy. Skeeth growled in annoyance and pulled Manda from his body with one clawed hand, snapping the reptile's spine. In a puff of smoke, one of Orochimaru's greatest allies disappeared. The scythe came down again, aimed for Orochimaru, but it seemed Lady Luck was on the side of evil, because the blade disappeared a second before it could hit. The staff was gone soon after, followed shortly by the cloak of red chakra. The terrifying beast was disappearing one piece at a time. Skeeth knew immediately what was going on, and let out a rage-filled roar. Naruto was losing consciousness, and with him would go Skeeth's connection to the world, meaning that Skeeth would disappear for now. Skeeth could not retain his form without Naruto there to keep it together, which made him completely dependent. In one final flash of crimson light, Skeeth was gone, replaced by a sleeping Naruto, and Orochimaru escaped from the forest, safe for the moment. Hinata threw Masamune into Sasuke's unprepared arms, rushing forward to catch her falling fiancé. Sliding on the tree bark, she stopped right beneath Naruto, letting him land in her arms. He was safe, for now. Gua. Gra. Naruto shot up, eyes wide open. He was in front of Kyuubi's cage again, and he had very little idea why. The last he remembered, he was fighting Orochimaru. So then how did he get? Grr. Naruto froze as his gaze fell upon the fox's prison, his mind having trouble comprehending what he was seeing. There, behind the bars, the large demon fox was combating his avatar, Skeeth. It seemed a draw, at the moment, but he could faintly make out bloodstains on the Kyuubi's dark pelt. Kit. Naruto focused on the nine tails, his wide blue eyes locked with the demon's red. The fox was holding Skeeth at bay. I can only keep him occupied for so long, it told him, growling angrily. You were right. Skeeth has grown a consciousness all his own and wants to experience the real world. With a grunt, Skeeth was thrown against the floor, pinned under the demon's paws, but it was putting up an admirable fight. Even subdued, it seemed to be tireless. If he succeeds, Kyuubi continued, he'll go berserk and destroy everything, eating up all of our combined chakra in the process. We'll both die. The beast grunted again, pushing his paws against its opponent's back, making sure that it couldn't move. He growled, trying to keep the rogue avatar from escaping its grasp. Skeeth thrashed, attempting to pierce the fox on his spikes. Use one of those seals you learned from the Forbidden Scroll. Kyuubi threw all its weight on its enemy. Seal Skeeth's consciousness away, and it quickly, just make sure that you don't put the seal over mine. I can't, Naruto shouted. I have enough chakra to perform a seal, but I'm unconscious, and I can't seal him while I'm unconscious. Fool. Kyuubi snarled, baring its fangs. Anything that happens to your astral body happens to your real body. Hinata wrung out the wet cloth, torn from her own jacket, and placed it gently on Naruto's forehead. He'd come down with a fever shortly after losing consciousness, and, in an effort to help, Hinata and Sasuke had taken him to a stream where they could be near a source of cool water constantly. It had been roughly an hour since the awake members of Team 7 had carried him to that location. It had been nearly 20 minutes since Sasuke had gone to find a few allied teams to assist them. Hinata's gaze traveled to Naruto's right arm, alerted by the sudden chakra flare that had come from his forearm. She watched, amazed, as a black pattern seemed to burn itself into her fiancé's skin, traveling the length of his muscular forearm. If she didn't know any better, she'd say it was a seal of some sort. His fingers suddenly twitched, writhing wildly without explanation. A vein stood out on the back of his hand, and the seal snaked its way across his palm, stopping before it reached his fingers. It twisted and conformed, changing blood red for seemingly no reason. Finally, it seemed done with whatever it was supposed to accomplish, flashing once before it disappeared beneath his skin. She felt the breath she hadn't known she'd been holding fall from her mouth in the form of a sigh. She didn't know what had just happened, but she was relieved it was over. Naruto's breathing evened out, and he settled down. He'd been writhing painfully, his breathing labored. She could only guess that it had something to do with the seal that had appeared as if from nowhere on his arm. Hinata smiled, moving her hand from his bare shoulder and running it through his wild hair. She and Sasuke had pulled his jacket and scarf from him when he started sweating. She was glad he wore a skin-tight sleeveless undershirt beneath his jacket, or she might have fainted. It was bad enough for her with just the shirt that hugged his frame so intimately, showing off every contour of his toned chest. She giggled lightly as he unconsciously snuggled closer to her, seeking warmth. It seemed, even asleep, he was still her Naruto-kun. Aishateru, she whispered, stroking his blonde locks delicately. Aishateru, Naruto-kun. Kyuubi sighed, licking his bloody foreleg. The brat had managed to seal Skeeth into his right arm. Naruto could still access Skeeth's powers and summon him, but the avatar's voice had fallen silent. Now, Naruto had complete control, without anything challenging that, but the struggle had still left Kyuubi with a few wounds. You okay? Kyuubi looked down at the blonde-haired boy, rolling his shoulder in a shrug. Bah. Just a flesh wound. It'll heal in no time. Good, Naruto nodded, hands on his hips. Now, there's a problem we have to discuss. What if the snake freak decides to come after Hinata-chan? I won't always be around, you know, and she's no match for Orochimaru. The beast shifted around, his wounds temporarily forgotten. There is one way, but it's much more complicated than you might want it to be. And once you choose this path, you'll have to go through with it. What is it? Naruto asked immediately. I'll do anything it takes to keep Hinata safe. Good, the Kyuubi cooed, laying his head on his paws. Then we're going to give your girlfriend an avatar. We'll disguise it as a normal summoning, and it'll effectively keep her safe. But doesn't that need your chakra? The beast shook his head, not necessarily. If we have her use a blood tribute, like a normal summon, it replaces the need for my chakra. The only downside is that such a substitute will make it marginally weaker than Skeeth. Well, that doesn't seem too bad, Naruto admitted, crossing his arms. What do I have to do? It's rather simple, Kyuubi told him. You just have to design its appearance and write the summoning scroll that your vixen will have to sign. I'll take care of its powers and creation. That doesn't sound too hard, Naruto replied. Is that it? That's it, the Nine Tails confirmed. But you'll be surprised. That's more difficult than it looks. Hinata sat in front of Naruto, bruised and exhausted. Her enemies were a good distance away, and one of them was unconscious. There was a horrible sinking feeling in her gut that she was going to die. But at least she'd die protecting her most precious person. At least she'd die protecting her Naruto-kun. Come on, girlie, Zaku said. His spiky hair as untouched as it had been since the beginning. It doesn't have to be this hard. Just hand over the Naruto brat, Dosu said, his single eye focused on the Hyuga girl. And we'll let you go. No harm, no foul. Lee could only stare at her awkwardly, his eyes half-lidded and his body motionless. He'd been defeated by the Dosu-Zaku tag team, his ears bleeding and his balance off. He was useless now. All he could do was watch as his comrade was mercilessly slaughtered. Never, Hinata hissed, glaring at them. I'll protect Naruto-kun, even if it costs me my life. Oh well, Dosu grinned beneath his bandages, rushing towards the defenseless girl. Time to end this. Some minor sound nins bullying these second-rate ninjas. I'm afraid I can't allow that. A voice said from up in the trees. Dosu stopped and turned his attention to the owner of the voice, a long-haired genin wearing some sort of jacket and black shorts. His eyes were the same milky white color as Hinata's and glared at them hatefully. Dosu snarled, more of them, they're like cockroaches. You made a mistake, he said, ignoring the sound nin's words. That knocked out freak is from my team and you're going to pay for that. If you're going to go any further, the veins around his eyes bulged, then I'm going all out. Something flickered on the Neji's Byakugan enhanced vision even before he had a chance to move. Huh? This chakra. If you don't like it so much, Dosu taunted, then stop acting cool and get down here. No, Neji said slowly, it seems that won't be necessary. Over near the slow-moving river, Naruto was slowly standing, a malevolent red chakra peeling off his form. It was vaporous in nature and took no definite shape. Neji's Byakugan could not seem to find where the unnatural chakra originated from, though it seemed more dense and intense around his stomach. Naruto's gleaming crimson eyes glared at the Auto Nins in front of him, as if willing them to combust spontaneously. In a low, dangerous voice, he asked, Hinata-chan, who did this to you? Naruto-kun. She gasped, her voice slightly hoarse, but she couldn't care less. He was okay, and that's all that mattered. Who did this? He asked again, his voice harsh and icy, contradicting the warm chakra covering his body. Zaku smirked proudly. We did it. The red chakra spiked, gaining size around the slim figure in the middle of it all. Neji flinched slightly as it grew brighter to his godly vision, and turned off his Byakugan. Naruto grinned evilly at Zaku. And Dosu, so, it was you, was it? Let's see, just how easy it is for me to tear you apart with this small fraction. Dosu's eye widened. His chakra is too large. Naruto's right hand suddenly whipped out to the side, as if he was swinging something. Then, forming from the red chakra surrounding his body, a scythe appeared, looking too large and heavy for someone of Naruto's size to wield effectively. But he stood there, holding it up with one hand, effortlessly. Dosu backed up instinctively. The large weapon had a tapered point on the bottom, from which a vine-like pattern crept up the metal shaft. At the top, There were large metal spikes, each one about a foot long. The blade itself seemed to be as tall as the user's forearm and at least twice as long. All in all, it looked positively wicked. Naruto sauntered forward slowly, the red chakra peeling of his form making it seem like he was on fire. He lacked his usual jacket and scarf, but he was no less intimidating to any sane person. Of course, Zaku wasn't just any sane person. Dosu. Zaku made a hand seal. No need to be afraid of this half-dead freak. Ultimate Zankuha. Naruto gave him a bored look, then flicked his wrist, his scythe cutting the attack in half horizontally. He seemed untouched, his clothing and body in perfect condition. Zaku only stared at him, flabbergasted. In a flicker of color, Naruto was gone, reappearing behind Zaku. Faster than the human eye could see, Naruto had carved a deep cut into his opponent's back, effectively preventing any future problems he may have experienced with the sound nin. He rooted his scythe in the earth, setting it up like a pillar. Naruto pulled Zaku from the ground, glaring hatefully at him. Setting the boy on his feet for a second, he pulled his fist back and landed a bone-crushing blow to his enemy's shoulder. Zaku was quickly soaring through the air, hitting a tree with his other shoulder. There was a sickening crack as he lost use of both his arms. Pulling his weapon from its earthy sheath, he turned towards Dosu. A deep frown stretched across his lips. Are you going to run? Or do I have to kick your ass, too? No way. Dosu backed up. I'm taking my teammates and leaving. Naruto smirked as the sound nins disappeared, the red chakra and crimson eyes fading. In a flash of blue, his scythe left him as well. That had been rather easy, though Naruto couldn't recall taking part in such an event the first time around. All right, Naruto said, rubbing his hands together, let's open those scrolls. Sasuke had retrieved an earth scroll on his scouting mission. He hadn't found anyone to help them, but he had found an enemy team from whom he swiped the scroll. He'd shown up about half a day after he'd left, a second scroll in his hands. But, Naruto-kun, Hinata protested. We're not supposed to. Yeah, Naruto. Sasuke agreed. Do you want to get us disqualified? Didn't you two listen to what she said? We're not supposed to open the scrolls until after we get to the tower. Sasuke blinked. Wait, back up. So we're supposed to open the scrolls once we get to the tower? I get it, Hinata said, smiling. It's just like Kakashi-sensei told us. Look underneath the underneath. She was hinting that we should open the scrolls once we got here. Ooh. Anko rubbed her fingers across the raw spot on her neck, trying to soothe the pain that flowed through it. It had been acting up ever since somewhere near the middle of the second exam. Does the curse mark still hurt? Sarutobi asked her, taking a puff on his pipe. Much less, she admitted, despite her still moving fingers. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Why'd he come here, though? One of the Chunin questioned, and why now? I think it's safe to assume, the Hokage said darkly, that he's come for Sasuke, and, worst-case scenario, a Hyuga as well. Hinata-san, most likely. Sandame's gaze traveled over to the stern face depicted in one of the paintings on the wall. The Yondaime's sapphire eyes stared back at him, as if telling him he had to do what was necessary for the sake of his village. He sighed, I think it's time. Inform the elders that, as soon as the Chunin exams end, the Anbu shall receive a new division. The old man took another puff from his pipe. After the Chunin exams, Tasuki no Ki will be created. Now, at the end of the second exam, the 21 genin remaining stood in a peculiar arena, waiting for the instructions to the third exam. In the front of the room stood a group consisting of Chunin, Junin, and the Hokage. Protruding from the front wall was a pair of stone hands forming the seal for Ram. Anko smirked at them from where she stood. Congratulations on passing. Hokage-sama will now explain the third test, so listen carefully. The Sandame took a step forward. Before we begin, there is something I'd like you to know. He tugged his hat down slightly. Why do we have all the alliance countries taking this exam together? To promote friendship amongst the countries, to raise the level of shinobi. I don't want you to be confused about the true meaning. This exam is a replacement for war among the allied countries. Sandame's face was impassive as he took a puff on his pipe. If you go back in time, the current allies were enemies who fought each other over who would rule. In order to prevent wasteful fighting, the stage that those countries chose for fighting, That is the origin of the Chunin exams. Sarutobi continued, undaunted by the questions thrown at him. It is true that this exam decides who is to become Chunin, but it is also an opportunity for the different countries to show off their ninja to the important figures who watch this third exam. A shinobi village is only as strong as its weakest link. Now then, he paused for a second, on to the third exam. Actually, a sick-looking Junin appeared in front of the Hokage, as referee. Hokage-sama, if I may. Sandame nodded. By all means. The Junin turned toward the genin, revealing his weary face and the dark bags under his eyes. I am Gecko Hayate, and I am the referee. Before the third test, I'm afraid we'll have to hold a preliminary. Since we are going to begin right away, I must ask any who wish to quit to do so now. Kabuto raised his hand. I wish to quit. Questioning stares followed his retreating back as he left, sparing a short, unnoticeable glance at Naruto and Sasuke. Hayate looked around. Right then, cough, cough. If no one else wishes to forfeit, let's begin the preliminary rounds. If you'll turn your attention to the screen behind me. Everyone turned their gazes to the large screen behind the sickly Junin, watching as the blackness faded into a dark gray. The letters, verses, lit up in the very center. Above them was the name, Uchiha. Sasuke, and below it was, Akado Yoroi. Now, Hayate said, if these two participants would come to the front. Sasuke grinned as he and Yoroi moved towards the examiner, each confident of their own ability. Naruto grinned as he and everyone else moved into the stand, knowing that Sasuke would fare a lot better without the curse mucking up his strengths. Hayate made a signal, then jumped away. Begin. Sasuke whipped through hand seals, stopping abruptly on Tiger and blowing a large fireball at his opponent. Yoroi flung himself to the side in a dodge, landing in a kneeling position. With a burst of chakra, he activated his bloodline limit, his palm light in a blue blaze. Goo! Sasuke's foot collided with Yoroi's stomach, sending the older genin flying. He slammed into the wall, then slid down it only to collapse on the floor. Sasuke grinned. Yoroi's brow furrowed as he stood. Teme. Sasuke's hand dived into his kunai pouch, pulling a scroll from its burlap depths. He unfurled it, biting his thumb and running it down. The open side. With a few hand seals, he let the revealed scroll drop to the floor. In a puff of smoke, a katana appeared, lacking a sheath. You'll need this, Naruto had told him. If you fight a weapons specialist, you'll be no good with just a kunai. Sasuke grabbed the sword by its black, lacquered hilt, holding it horizontally as he ran his left hand down the gray blade. He grinned as he caught sight of the word inscribed on the shiny metal. With a flick of his wrist, the scroll rolled back up and he stuck it back in his pouch. I won't tell you that sword's name, Naruto had said, adamant about his decision. You'll have to find that out for yourself, in order to unlock its true power. Roar for me, Sasuke whispered. Roar for me, Shinenga. Sasuke's grin widened as his Sharingan showed him the aura of chakra surrounding the blade. With flourish, he stabbed it into the ground, going through a half-seal to start his technique. Doden. Yama no Tsuchi. Earth style, mountain of earth. A pillar of brown earth and rock rose from beneath the tile, catching the kneeling Yoroi in the stomach. It continued to rise, farther and farther, until Yoroi's body hit the ceiling with a thud. There was a rushing sound as the rock and such returned to the ground beneath the tile. Yoroi's unconscious body fell to the ground with a sickening whack. Hayate stepped up and checked for a pulse. With a gesture, he called over the medic team. Akado Yoroi was carried away on a stretcher, most likely suffering from multiple broken bones and much internal bleeding. Hayate returned to the center of the ring. Winner, Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke unsummoned his sword, returning to the stands with a grin on his face. Naruto nodded at him, his eyes focused on the screen as the next matchup appeared. Zaku was quickly defeated by Shino, his broken shoulders and the horrible slash wound from Naruto leaving him at an amazing disadvantage. In under a minute, he had lost to Shino's swarm of chakra-eating insects. The next match ended nearly as quickly. Kankuro took down Tsurugi Masumi with apparent ease. His mastery of puppetry had tricked the other boy into using his trump card on the lifeless puppet. It was child's play after that. Ino and Sakura's match ended in an anticlimactic draw. They were too evenly matched to take the other down, so they finished with a double knockout. The screen lit up for the fifth time, reading, Temari vs. Tenten. This turned out to be the worst matchup for Tenten. Her weapons couldn't reach her opponent at all and she was defeated easily. Temari had beaten her brutally, as evidenced by the fact that she had caught the weapon's mistress on her fan. Tenten's back bent at an unhealthy angle. Lee had gotten angry and was ready to fight, but Guy held him back. Lee, still angry, nodded and relinquished his fighting pose, for now. Nara Shikamaru vs. Kinsuchi. Their match didn't last very long either. Kin had had Shikamaru caught in her trap for a few moments, but Shikamaru had come back and outdone her. Using his Kagemain no Jutsu, he forced her to hit her head against the wall. She knocked herself unconscious and Shikamaru was declared the winner. After Kin was carried away on a stretcher, the screen flashed again, revealing the combatants of the next fight, Uzumaki Naruto vs. Inuzuka Kiba. "Ha! We got lucky, Akamaru," Kiba gloated, jumping down into the arena. Akamaru, his dog, gave a hesitant bark of agreement. Naruto leapt off of the railing, his right cheek still wet from Hinata's "good luck" kiss. He was just as confident about his victory. "Hey," Kiba clenched his fist. "I feel bad for you, so I'll end this in one punch." "Yeah, sure," Naruto told him, "but before you beat me, you'll have to force me to take off my weights." "Oh," Kiba arched an eyebrow. "What difference will a couple pounds make?" "A couple pounds?" Naruto laughed. "Try 10 times the normal gravity, then you'll have an accurate estimation." "Still won't change anything," Kiba retorted. "A loser is still a loser." "No matter what you try to change," Neji glared at Hinata with his Byakugan eyes, "a loser will always be a loser." Naruto felt his anger spike. Those were not the words to say to him, especially now, with Hinata so much closer to him. Naruto leveled a glare of his own at Kiba. A snarl stretched across his lips. He'd never let the boy live it down, now that he'd nearly repeated Neji's hateful words towards the innocent Hinata. "Begin." Flipping through 4 hand seals, Naruto braced his right wrist with his left hand, a familiar flame like chakra embracing his right palm. It quickly turned from blue to red, licking his skin and clothes but causing no harm. Naruto locked his sapphire eyes with Kiba's surprised ones, Taiyushin Itu Tansen. In a blur, Naruto disappeared, reappearing in front of his opponent. His flaming fist crashed into Kiba's jacket-covered chest. Flames exploded outwards, burning away a good portion of the boy's coat. It had to be the most painful thing Kiba had ever felt. Kiba backed up slowly, clutching at the burns on the left half of his torso. "Damn," he muttered, "you're gonna have to do better than that, dead last." Naruto growled, jumping backward and flashing through another set of seals. He thrust his hands to the floor, allowing his chakra to call upon the items he was seeking. As soon as he could feel them in his grasp, he pulled them from their earthy prison, crossing them in front of his chest much the same way he had during his fight with Orochimaru. Up in the stands, Hinata and Sasuke's eyes widened, realizing the intensity of Naruto's anger if he was using them. If Naruto had any sympathy in him, he'd end it quickly, but Hinata glanced at the scowl planted firmly on Naruto's lips. The chances of such luck for Kiba were very slim. Kakashi noticed the tense atmosphere, and came to the conclusion that the only thing missing in this little bout was the dramatic battle theme. "Kara no Sora," Naruto hissed, his sword's extra blades popping open. Kiba went through his own seals, calling out the name of his jutsu as he knelt on all fours, Shikyaku no Jutsu. Naruto held his blades loosely by his side as Kiba came charging. At the last second, he brought one up, blocking Kiba's now clawed hands. With barely a move, he blocked Kiba's second swipe, a ricochet-like noise filling the arena as his steel clashed with Kiba's hardened nails. A third swipe, a fourth swipe, a fifth swipe, a sixth, a seventh. They were all blocked easily, the furious scowl never leaving Naruto's face. Even the stupidest of people could see that Kiba was outclassed, and most of the Junin sensei were appalled by Naruto's new set of skills. Kiba pressed against the one of the two swords with all his might, trying to push it back, but it was useless. It wouldn't move unless Naruto moved it. Kiba was surprised when the other sword swung around, catching him in the chest and leaving a shallow cut over top the burns. He hissed painfully. Naruto advanced slowly, allowing his swords to disappear in a puff of smoke. He held out his hand, inches from Kiba's face, who had been starting to stand again. An orb of swirling chakra gathered, pure white in color. Kiba was motionless, too stunned to move, the orb mere centimeters from his nose. Boom, Naruto whispered. The side of the orb farthest from Naruto's palm collapsed, the pressurized winds howling as they sped outwards, crashing into Kiba's face. Kiba went flying, headfirst, into the wall at the other end of the arena, leaving a crater as he slumped onto his butt. Hayate waited 10 seconds, then checked on the Inuzuka boy. Once it was confirmed that he was unconscious, Hayate raised his hand. Winner. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto turned to head back upstairs, pausing for a second to glare over his shoulder. That's what you get, bastard. Hyuga Hinata versus Hyuga Neji. I never thought I'd be facing you, Neji said, a cold grin on his lips. Hinata-sama. Neji Nisan, Hinata whispered. Before we begin, I'd like to thank you, Hinata-sama. Neji's mouth twisted into an angry snarl, for causing my father's death. No. Still stuttering, Neji scoffed. I can sense your inferiority complex from here. I bet you didn't even want to enter this exam. You just did so because your teammates wanted to. No, Hinata interrupted. I entered this exam, to change myself. Neji's eyes narrowed. You really are a spoiled brat of the main house, aren't you? Don't you understand? People cannot change? A loser like you will always be a loser? Shut up. Neji's hateful eyes flickered to Naruto, the origin of the angry command. You and your destiny shit aren't worth a single speck of dirt on a mule's ass. Hinata-chan, kick that bastard into next week. Hinata moved into a stance. Neji caught it out of the corner of his eye and smirked, mimicking her. Begin. In an instant, they were at each other's throats. The 10-foot distance that separated them closed almost like magic, and in a flash, they were mere inches apart. Neji ducked under Hinata's first strike, stepping inside her guard and aiming his own attack at her heart. Hinata quickly dodged to the side, going against the traditional Juken motions by throwing a roundhouse kick into Neji's stomach. Neji used his momentum to duck under her kick, tucking his body into a ball as he rolled out of the way. Faster than most could follow, he was on his feet again, flying towards Hinata with as much speed as he possessed. Hinata moved to the side of his first glowing hand, but wasn't fast enough to dodge the follow-up attack of Neji's left hand. Her shoulder burning in pain, Hinata stumbled backwards, clutching at where her cousin had made contact. Naruto grit his teeth up in the stands, his Sharingan, which was concealed by a complex genjutsu, glaring down at the battle before him. He'd taken it out to determine who was winning and who had the advantage. With the Juken style of taijutsu, it was often hard to determine the outcome. Naruto's lips pulled back in a frustrated snarl, his brow knit. From his viewpoint, Hinata was going to lose to Neji's superior speed and prowess. She was going to wind up injured just as badly as she had the first time around, and that was something Naruto would not allow. But she was going to lose, unless, Hinata-chan. The match paused as the combatants turned to look at the grinning owner of the voice that had spoken. Hinata-chan, take them off.